Hey guys, tonight's story starts with a blanket that smells like soup, a floor colder than a witch's kneecap, and a chicken who clearly thinks she owns the place. There's no thermostat, no shampoo, and definitely no breakfast menu. Just a bowl of mystery stew that wiggles when you poke it. Out here, survival isn't about knights or glory. It's about pretending bark tea is drinkable, gnawing on bread that could double as a building material, and discovering the only reliable heating system is a goat with boundary issues. Welcome to the forgotten medieval survival techniques we'd rather not remember. But before you get too cozy, take a second to gently tap that new hype button YouTube just added. It really does help little guys like me push through the algorithm. And take a second to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy this strange little corner of quiet storytelling. And drop a comment with where you're listening from and what time it is for you. It's strangely comforting to know who else is drifting off with us around the world. Now get comfortable, let the day melt away, and we'll drift back together into the quiet corners of the past. You wake up to the sound of your own nose, which has decided to whistle through one side like a drunk flute. It's morning, probably. There's no clock. Just a vague gray light leaking through the wooden slats of the wall, like the sky's embarrassed to be here. The window has no glass. It never did. You stuffed it with straw last night, but now the straw is missing, possibly stolen by the wind or an ambitious rat with architectural dreams. The breeze smells like wet moss and future regrets. You pull the blanket closer, even though it technically belongs to your cousin and is really more of a rug with unresolved emotional trauma. It's scratchy. It smells like soup. You forgive it. You do not bathe. Not because you don't believe in bathing, but because bathing is something reserved for saints and nobility, and you're currently living 3 inches above mildew. Bathing also steals heat. Heat is survival. So instead, you rub your armpits with last week's shirt and hope no one notices, which is safe, because everyone smells like an overcooked goat. You scratch your leg with your other foot and try not to think about the noise it makes. It's too early for introspection. The bed is not a bed. It's a mat stuffed with hay, some of which is still poking you in places too private to negotiate with. Around you is a pile of siblings, cousins, one deeply resentful aunt, and a chicken. You're not sure where the chicken came from or why she's wearing a bit of ribbon, but she looks judgmental and warm, so you allow it. Breathing carefully, you begin the process of escape. This is not done quickly. There are protocols. First, you shift your foot, which is trapped beneath someone's elbow. Then, you wiggle sideways, dislodging your knee from beneath the ant's ribcage. She snorts but remains asleep. Thank the saints. Last time she woke up early, she told everyone about her dream where she married a wheelbarrow. She still hasn't stopped naming the goats after the children they would have had. Outside, the village is making its noises. A cartwheel squeaks like it's being slowly tortured. A cow moos with the despair of a mother who just found hoofprints on her clean laundry. Somewhere, someone's already chopping wood with the loud, deliberate rhythm of a man trying to prove a point. You don't rise. Not yet. Rising is a commitment. Rising means facing the cold, the chores, the likelihood that breakfast will involve cabbage. Again, you pull the blanket tighter. You're not alone in resisting the morning. Someone to your left lets out a groan that may have come from their soul. Someone to your right mutters something about worms and then farts. The chicken clucks once, offended. You suspect she's planning a coup. Eventually, your bladder makes the decision for you. It's either get up or perform a complicated social apology later. You peel back the blanket, breathe in the crisp air, and immediately regret every decision that led to this moment. It's colder than a witch's kneecap. Your breath fogs in the air like you're exhaling secrets. You shiver violently, shake straw out of your tunic, and slip your feet into shoes that may have been left out overnight, judging by their current texture. One of them is damp. You pretend not to notice. Survival requires denial. You step outside. The door creaks dramatically, as if auditioning for a tragedy. The morning slaps you in the face. It's foggy, damp, and filled with the scent of wood smoke, manure, and the particular sadness of boiled leeks. A chicken runs past, possibly yours, possibly no one's. Chickens have very few rules. The path is slippery with mud, which is less like earth and more like pudding someone gave up on halfway through. You nearly fall, catch yourself on a post, and nod to the pig watching you from behind the fence. He snorts. You snort back. It's a mutual understanding. You do your business behind the compost pile, eyes darting for witnesses, though no one cares. The villagers have seen worse. Last spring, Martha fell in the privy and had to be hauled out with a rope and 3 apologies. She now avoids eye contact with barrels. Back inside, the house is stirring. Your youngest sibling is chewing on a piece of kindling. Your mother is boiling something that may be oats, maybe bark. She stirs with the grim determination of someone who's lost hope, but still has teeth. Your father is sharpening a hoe with a rock and a lot of passive aggression. You greet them with a grunt. They grunt back. This is love. You sit at the table, which wobbles like it has trust issues. Breakfast arrives in a wooden bowl that looks suspiciously like last night's dinner. You poke at it. It pokes back. You eat it anyway. It tastes like survival and faint sadness, but it's warm, and that's enough. You drink a cup of tea made from boiled roots and whispered prayers. It tastes like both. The chicken hops up onto the table. No one stops her. She pecks your spoon. You let her. She's earned it. Across the room, your uncle is sneezing into a scarf he insists is medicinal. You're fairly sure it's just damp wool, but you're not a doctor. You're not anything, really, except alive, and that counts. Your day hasn't begun so much as it's ambled toward you with a limp and a sigh. Outside, the sun has decided to make an appearance, sort of. It peeks over the hill like it's checking to see if the village is worth it. The mist rises reluctantly. Somewhere, a goat screams. That's normal. Gertrude always screams before noon. You pull on your second tunic, because layers mean heat, and heat means fewer regrets, and step into the cold with all the enthusiasm of a man going to his own flogging. You are ready, not for glory or purpose or success, just for not dying today. Again, and that's the real trick. Not heroism, not battles, not grand quests, just waking up, breathing, and not freezing to death before lunch. You've already won. You chew something that might be a crust, might be a root, might be part of your boot. It's unclear, and you've decided it's better not to ask questions this early. The morning is too fragile, like a chicken's first egg or your aunt's temper before her mushroom tea. Whatever you're eating came from a basket by the hearth labeled edible in charcoal. It's hard, uneven, smells faintly like floor, and tastes like commitment. You chew slowly, thoughtfully, pretending this is a deliberate culinary experience and not just an ongoing act of oral punishment. The bowl beside you holds something that was once porridge, then became soup, then tried to be a sauce, but failed at all 3, and now exists in a gray purgatory. It wiggles when you nudge it. You assume that's normal. There's a bit of hair in it. Human, probably. You look away, which counts as acceptance. Across the room, your cousin is dunking a rock-hard biscuit into a cup of hot liquid that smells like someone boiled a broom. You ask what island. He says tea. You ask what kind of tea. He says green. You ask what plant. He shrugs and points toward the yard where a particularly suspicious hedge grows. You take a sip. It tastes like secrets and damp. This is called foraging. You don't know what any of it island. You drink it anyway. You've survived worse. Breakfast is not a meal so much as a test of resilience. It is not intended to bring joy. It is not intended to be remembered. It is meant to fill the stomach with enough mass to keep you upright until the next vague excuse for sustenance rolls around. You once read somewhere, or overheard a man in the tavern yell into his bowl, that breakfast is the most important meal of the day. You are now certain that man was rich, mad, or from a land where breakfast includes more than regret. The bread, if you can call it that, sits on the table like a warning. It was baked 4 days ago and hasn't blinked since. Your mother slices it with a knife that has seen more combat than your uncle's sword. The sound it makes is less slice and more gravel complaint. The slices come away jagged, dry, and lightly dusted with mystery. You pick one up. It's heavier than expected. You bite it. It bites back. Someone suggests honey. Everyone laughs. Not because it's funny, but because it's too sad not to laugh. Honey is for weddings and rich people and bees that haven't unionized. Instead, you smear your bread with something that might be rendered fat or might be wax, but you've already committed, and your mouth is already involved. Your younger sibling pulls something from under the table and offers it to you like a gift. It's a shriveled apple, mostly. It's lost its color and shape, but retained its confidence. You thank them. You eat it. You're not sure if it's fermented or just ambitious. Either way, it fizzes a little. You count that as nutrition. There's a pot on the fire filled with yesterday's stew, which was made from the day before's leftovers, which came from a rabbit no one remembers catching, and vegetables that probably weren't ready. The stew smells like moss and bad choices. You ladle some into a cracked bowl and watch it congeal with pride. You eat around the floating bits. One might be bone, one might be a beet, one definitely winked at you. Outside, the rooster screams like he's just seen the tax collector. You don't flinch. You stir your breakfast thing, blow on it, and let your mind wander. You think of cheese, which you've heard of but only seen in pictures. Someone once brought a wedge back from the manor, and the entire family gathered around it like it was a visiting noble. You remember it fondly. It smelled like feet and possibility. Back at the table, your aunt complains that the turnips aren't turning out like they used to. You're not sure what that means. No one does. She says the soil is off. She says the goats are plotting. She says breakfast used to mean something. She stirs her tea with a twig and glares at the fire like it owes her money. The fire snaps. A log shifts. Someone swears. You spoon the last of your meal into your mouth and try not to crunch. You fail. Your tooth makes a noise like a bad decision. You hold very still. Nothing breaks. That's a win. Someone across the room burps a hymn. Another person sneezes into their cup. The chicken hops up onto the table and steals a bit of crust. No one stops her. She's faster than most of the children and smarter than half the adults. She's earned her place. You reach for the last piece of bread and catch your brother's eye. It's a standoff. You both freeze. Then, like seasoned gladiators of carbohydrate warfare, you lunge. He gets the bread. You get the spoon. You hit him with the spoon. It's a draw. The table clears slowly. Bowls are stacked. Cups are wiped with cloths that used to be other things. The spoon is retrieved from behind the bench. Your father mumbles something about field work. Your mother tells you to dig weeds and not your grave. Someone farts. Someone else claims it was the dog. You don't have a dog. As you step outside, your belly is not full, but it is no longer empty. There is a strange comfort in that. In knowing that somehow, by root, bark, crust, and curiosity, you've once again made it through the most deceptive meal of the day. It wasn't good. It wasn't memorable. But it was breakfast, sort of. You walk into the cold with a mouthful of bark tea and enough energy to almost pretend you're ready. You've eaten stranger things. You've survived worse. And if you're lucky, lunch might involve something that once had feathers, or at least a vegetable with ambition. You rub a paste made of ash and thyme on your elbows. It smells like burnt toast and panic. You don't know what it's supposed to do, but it makes your skin tingle in a way that suggests either healing or the early signs of regret. Bertha says it draws out the humors, though she never specifies which ones. You ask once, and she waves a spoon at you and mutters something about spleen spirits. You decide not to ask again. Bertha lives 3 doors down in a cottage that leans slightly to the left, like it's been through something. Her front step is covered in jars, bowls, sacks, and one very large rock she insists is sentient with memory. You never touch the rock. You nod at it respectfully. It nods back. You're not entirely sure that part's in your head. You don't go to Bertha because she's reliable. You go because she's there, and her concoctions sometimes make people feel better, and only occasionally make them grow an extra nipple or lose the ability to pronounce the letter R. She has a large book with no words, just drawings of leaves and animals that may or may not still exist. When she flips through it, she makes noises like mm-hmm and oh ho, which you assume is part of the diagnostic process. She once cured your cousin's rash with a mixture of fermented carrot and what turned out to be wine vinegar. The cousin stopped itching and started singing. The cure lasted 3 days, and a mild hallucination of Saint Agnes riding a duck. Everyone called it a success. You don't trust doctors. Not anymore. The last one came from 3 villages over, rode in on a mule with a sad eye, and prescribed leeches for everything from headaches to heartbreak. He died of his own cure after putting too many leeches on himself to prove a point. The town gave him a respectful burial, and then burned all his tools just to be safe. Now, when someone says, medical, everyone looks at Bertha and hopes she's sober. Today, your knee hurts. You don't remember hurting it, but it aches when it rains, when you stand, when you sit, and especially when you think about it. You limp to Bertha's, and she smears a poultice on it with the same expression she uses to clean fish. It contains crushed lavender, something she calls earth honey, and a generous spoonful of whatever was in the back of her cupboard labeled, "Do not." You ask what it does, and she says, "It confuses the pain," which you assume is a strategy. The poultice smells like a garden arguing with a chimney. You thank her anyway, because surviving here means trusting the people who still wake up each day and pretend to know things. Back home, you apply your own remedies when you can't get to Bertha. You crush mint with a rock and rub it on your temples when your head aches. It does nothing for the pain but gives you the illusion of control, which is close enough. You chew willow bark when your joints throb. It tastes like old promises and guilt, but someone once said it was the ancestor of aspirin. Whatever that island, you boil pine needles into a tea so bitter it causes involuntary introspection. Your aunt swears by it. She also swears during it. Sometimes you dig up roots from the woods, guessing wildly and hoping instinct guides your hand more than stupidity. You hold them up to the light, sniff them, lick them, and whisper threats until they reveal their purpose. Most don't. One root made you see colors that didn't exist. One made you sleep for 2 days and wake up fluent in goat. One turned your tongue purple for a week. You've started writing down results in a leather-bound journal titled Definitely or Maybe. Any no dasker. You've learned that dirt isn't just dirt, it's context. Some dirt is clean, some dirt is holy, some dirt is haunted. The best dirt for healing comes from the north side of the old tree behind the chapel ruins, dug up with a wooden spoon during a full moon while reciting a hymn you half remember. Bertha taught you that. She said if it doesn't work, it's because your soul flinched. You believed her, mostly because she said it while pointing a beetroot at your face with genuine authority. You once made a salve using badger fat and rosemary. It worked well on burns but made your skin smell like stew. Another time you mixed clay and vinegar and applied it to a bee sting. It bubbled ominously and then fizzed itself into the floorboards. You never found out if it was successful, but the sting went away, and the floor still hums at night. You count that as a draw. You keep all your ingredients in little pouches and cracked jars. You label them with charcoal and increasingly nervous handwriting. One is labeled "Might Help." One is labeled "Ask Bertha." One is labeled "No." You keep that one buried behind the shed, next to the shovel you no longer trust. There's an art to believing in things that don't explain themselves. You wrap your elbow in linen soaked with nettle tea and pretend that this is normal, that everyone lives like this, crouched beside the hearth, whispering threats at their own limbs. You tell yourself it's working. You tell yourself you feel better. You breathe deeply through your mouth and choose to believe. Because survival isn't about certainty. It's about repetition. If something didn't kill you last time, you do it again, but with more confidence and less supervision. You wear your burns like medals, your itches like warnings. You catalog your bruises. You trust your instincts and occasionally consult the chicken. Bertha tells you healing is half herbs and half attitude. You ask what happens if you don't have the attitude. She hands you a shot of something cloudy in a chipped cup and tells you to shut up and drink. You drink. It burns. It helps. Probably. Tomorrow, you'll make another paste. Maybe basil and soot. Maybe fennel and desperation. Maybe just spit and hope. You'll rub it on your chest and wait for the pain to either leave or introduce itself. You'll listen to the wind and wonder if that's a sign. You'll check the moss in your jar. You'll believe in dirt, not because it's proven, but because it's yours. You layer 3 tunics, 1 squirrel pelt, and a cape that might once have been curtains, judging by the embroidered grapes and faint scent of dust panic. It drapes dramatically, especially when caught in the wind or the door. You pretend this is intentional. Warmth is not about fashion. It's about mass and volume, about wearing enough textile density to confuse the air around you into thinking you're a bear. You are less a person now and more a walking hamper with opinions. Still, you shiver. The cold finds you anyway. It always does. It's clever like that. The fire burns in the hearth, but weakly, like it's not really into it today. You feed it sticks and encouragement. It responds with a hiss and the smell of damp pine. You sit close, but not too close. You learned that lesson last winter when your fringe caught fire and your cousin had to put it out with a ladle. The hair grew back, eventually, but the smell still haunts your dreams. You keep one eye on the flames and the other on your scarf, which has begun to unravel in protest. You rewrap it tightly. If you're going to slowly freeze into a monument of poor planning, you're going to do it with dignity. Staying warm without setting the house on fire is a delicate balance. A dance, really. You must cultivate your heat like a secret, gently, persistently, without drawing too much attention. You light a candle in the corner, not for light, but to make the room feel like it's trying. Every flicker adds a degree of psychological warmth. You press your feet against the stone floor and imagine you're elsewhere. Maybe somewhere where people wear shoes indoors and the air doesn't bite. Your mother bustles past, carrying a log in each arm and muttering about smoke spirits. She dumps the wood beside the hearth and tells you to breathe like a wolf if you want to stay warm. You try. It doesn't work. You sound like an asthmatic bear. She shakes her head and throws a handful of dried herbs into the fire. The room smells better, but the fire takes it personally and sulks lower. You stare at it with all the desperation of a child trying to will soup into being. It does not reward you. You retreat to the corner where the heat lingers longest. It's near the chimney, but far enough from the soot that your clothes won't turn gray again. You settle in, knees tucked under your chin, hands inside your sleeves, hood pulled so low you look like a monk who's given up. The cat joins you. She's not warm, but she's insulting enough to feel like company. She kneads your knee for a moment and then decides you're too bony. She leaves in search of a softer person. Your aunt recommends movement. Cold doesn't catch the busy, she says, while lunging across the room with a broom like she's warding off bandits. You try moving. You attempt jumping in place. This lasts 8 seconds before your tunic rides up, and the cold air assaults your kidneys like a thief. You sit back down, humiliated, breath fogging in front of you like a ghost telling you to give up. The chair creaks in sympathy. You try to believe in friction. You rub your hands together, rub your arms, rub your feet. You generate something that could be warmth if it had more ambition. Outside, the wind howls. Not a romantic howl, more like a tax collector screaming into a broken flute. The shutters rattle. The door groans. You consider nailing it shut, but then remember you're supposed to fetch water soon. You delay the decision. Procrastination is its own kind of insulation. Your cousin enters wearing something made entirely of fur. No one knows what kind of animal it was, but it looks like it lost the fight. He smells like boiled leather and victory. He announces that he has invented a new technique. He lines his boots with hay and then wraps his legs in strips of wool. Everyone stares at him. No one speaks. Then someone sneezes, and your uncle drops a spoon. The moment passes. You wonder if it would work. You wonder if you could get away with stealing his hay. Later, you go outside. Not because you want to, but because warmth sometimes means doing something terrible, like fetching water. You wrap another scarf around your head and put mittens over your gloves. Your fingers still go numb. The air slices your nose open with invisible knives. The sky is gray, but not the kind that promises snow. It's the kind that threatens. You walk quickly, knees high, arms flailing slightly, like a very sad bird learning to fly. The water is half frozen. You chip at it with a stick. You fill the bucket with slush and pride. You spill some on your shoe. The cold seeps in immediately, like guilt. You consider crying, but decide your tears would freeze before they hit your chin. You walk home faster, shoulder tense, arms wrapped tightly, muttering curses against the concept of wind. Inside, the fire has grown bold again. Someone fed it a chunk of resin, and now it dances like it means it. You stand near, carefully, not too near. Last time, your sleeve ignited, and you had to roll on the floor while your grandmother hit you with a broom out of reflex. You now treat fire like an unpredictable god, useful, majestic, prone to fits of rage. You peel off your layers slowly. Each one sheds a bit of snow, a bit of mud, a bit of your will to live. You hang the damp parts by the fire. You rotate them every few minutes, a ritual you follow with religious precision. Dryness is hope. Dryness is the dream. You sit down in the warmest spot and exhale something close to satisfaction. The fire crackles. The window rattles. Your cape droops onto the floor and collects dust with quiet dignity. You lift a cup of something warm, possibly broth, possibly tea, possibly just hot water with vague intentions, and drink. It burns your tongue. You like it. You survive another cold day without combustion. You consider this a triumph. The house remains upright. Your hair remains intact. The heat to risk of internal combustion ratio, while vague, has held steady. For now, the fish glares at you. You glare back. It flops once, not defiantly but mournfully, like it knows this moment will haunt you every time it rains. You hesitate, gutting knife in hand, knuckles cold and conscience louder than usual. The fish's eye is glossy and wet, and somehow still judgmental. You try to feel nothing. You fail. You gut it anyway. This is not personal. This is breakfast. You tell yourself the fish had a good life, but you know it didn't. It lived in a muddy creek, the color of dishwater and ambition. It probably never knew joy, or if it did, it was the moment before your cousin slapped it out of the water with a bucket. Now it lies on the table, still twitching. You apologize, quietly, not out of guilt but out of habit. Apologizing to your food is a kind of prayer here. Sometimes it works. Sometimes it just makes you feel like less of a monster with a paring knife. The knife is old. The blade curves slightly from years of use and once fell into a fire, which is why it smells faintly of ash and history. You sharpen it on a rock because that's what your grandfather did, and you trust old men with quiet hands. You drag it through the belly of the fish and try not to look too closely at what comes out. The guts are warm and wrong-colored. You scoop them into a bowl labeled pigs. The pigs don't care. The pigs eat everything, including your boots if you stand too long. You keep your sleeves rolled up and your mind rolled back. Emotional distance is a tool, just like the knife, just like the stone, just like the numbness in your fingers that comes from working before sunrise with no gloves and no options. You once tried to name a chicken. You never made that mistake again. The chicken, of course, died. The stew was excellent, but the guilt was chewy. You rinse the fish in cold water, scrubbing off slime and regret with a stiff bristled brush that used to be a broom. Your cousin says the slime is where the flavor lives. Your cousin also eats moss recreationally. You do not trust your cousin. You slice the fish into neat halves, the bones cracking softly like whispered curses. The head you leave on, because some say it's good luck. Others say it sees your soul. Either way, it stays. You lay the pieces out on a wooden board stained with stories. Salt, crushed herbs, a hint of lemony plant you're 60% sure isn't poisonous. You rub it in with your hands, slow and firm, as if this fish might still wake up and demand better treatment. It doesn't. The fire hisses behind you, waiting. Your aunt wanders in and nods approvingly. She says you're becoming practical. She says emotion is for people with food to spare. She says the fish probably had it coming. You don't ask what that means. The smell of fish fills the cottage. Not fresh fish, but worked fish, handled fish. Fish that has passed through a moment of intimacy and into something edible. Your siblings cheer when they smell it, even though none of them helped catch, clean, or season it. They have the luxury of being excited. You have the responsibility of pretending this doesn't weigh on you. One of them asks if it was the big one from the shallows. You nod. They say it had a funny face. You agree. As the fish cooks, you sit by the fire and stare at your hands. They smell of river and steel. A small cut on your thumb stings with each heartbeat, a pulsing reminder that survival is transactional. You give something. You take something. You try not to keep score. Bertha once told you the fish carry memories in their bones. She also once told you to eat mushrooms that turned out to be soap. You've learned to listen to Bertha with a filter. Still, you wonder, does this fish remember the cold current? The struggle against the bucket? The way you flinched before the final cut? You hope not. You hope it only remembers the mud and the sky, and not the face of the teenager who couldn't make eye contact while learning to separate compassion from consumption. The skin crisps, the edges brown. Someone drops a spoon in excitement. You pull the fish from the pan with practiced care. You plate it on a flat piece of bark because the good dishes are saved for people who die with titles. The fish looks serene now, resigned, delicious. You pass out pieces with your hands, wiping them on your trousers between servings. Nobody complains. Grease glistens on your fingertips. You eat your portion last. It's good. Better than it should be. The meat is soft, the seasoning faint but confident. You chew slowly. You chew respectfully. You do not waste. Even the skin is gone by the time the meal ends. Your littlest brother sucks on a bone until your aunt swats it from his hand. The dog takes it and disappears under the bench. The only thing left is the eye. Still judging. You wrap the remains in linen and bury them under the old tree behind the cottage. Your family says it keeps the soil strong. You think it keeps the guilt manageable. You press the dirt down hard and pat it twice. You whisper another apology. This one's just for you. You walk back inside and wash the board. The water is cold. Your hands are colder. You dry them on your cape, which smells increasingly like every mistake you've made in the kitchen. You hang the knife on its nail and sit by the fire, watching the smoke curl into stories. You stare into the embers and try to remember if you always felt like this, if you always flinched before the cut, if maybe one day you won't. The fish glares at you in your memory. You glare back. Neither of you wins. You survive anyway. You collect rain in a bucket that once held pickles, or maybe eels. It's hard to say, because it still smells faintly of brine and regret, and you've scrubbed it with ash 3 times this week alone. The rainwater comes slow and cold, dripping off the edge of the roof in hesitant drops, like even the sky isn't sure you deserve it. You wait with the bucket in hand, balancing on the slick mud like a confused stork, hoping the wind doesn't shift and blow the good water sideways onto your neighbor's goats again. The goats don't need hydration. The goats are smug. The water fills halfway before you give up. Your arms are tired, and the drizzle has turned into something meaner, angrier, less about nourishment, and more about punishment. You tuck the bucket under the overhang and hope it gathers enough to make what you're optimistically calling dinner. You go inside, wipe your hands on your shirt, which was once brown but now just contains multitudes, and you light a fire that smells like damp socks and ambition. In the pantry, really a shelf, really a plank, nailed into a wall, you find a single turnip. It stares at you, lumpy and suspicious, clearly aware that it's about to become the centerpiece of your culinary performance. You pat it gently. You apologize. You name it Gerald. Then you peel it with a knife so dull it might be classified as a spoon in other countries. Bits of skin stick to your thumb. You lick one without thinking and immediately regret it. Gerald is earthy in the way graveyards are earthy. You check the bucket again. The water level has risen, but it has also acquired a floating leaf, 3 specks of ash, and something that looks like it might have once been airborne. You remove them with a ladle and a prayer, then carry the water inside as though it's holy, because in a way, it island. It is the closest thing to clean you've seen all week. You pour it into the pot and listen to it sigh against the metal. You drop Gerald in with ceremony. The turnip thunks. It does not float. This feels symbolic. The soup begins to bubble slowly, reluctantly. It's not a happy boil. It's a tired one. You stir it with a stick you've used so many times it's practically soup-flavored. You add a pinch of salt, scraped from the bottom of a jar you suspect used to hold jam. You find half a garlic clove that has seen better centuries and drop it in for personality. You add 5 lies. That this will taste better tomorrow. That turnip is filling. That you meant to make it thin. That it's good for your skin. And that you are not sad. These lies thicken the broth in a way truth never could. Your cousin walks in and asks if you're making stew. You say yes because soup sounds pathetic. He leans over the pot, sniffs, and offers you a handful of something green and stringy that he claims is bog parsley. You take it. You do not believe him. You throw it in anyway, because at this point, you're gambling with your taste buds, not your soul. The pot hisses in response. The cousin leaves to chase a chicken and possibly himself. You taste the soup. It tastes like water that knows it used to be part of a cloud. It tastes like hope diluted by circumstance. It tastes like Gerald tried his best, but ultimately failed to inspire. You chew through a piece of something chewy and tell yourself it's probably edible. You sip again, slower this time. If you drink without thinking, it's almost satisfying. You tell yourself hydration is survival, and flavor is optional. This is your new motto. You repeat it until it loses meaning. Your aunt stops by and insists it needs vinegar. You don't have vinegar, so she hands you a cloth dipped in something sharp and sour and tells you to wave it near the pot. You do, and the steam rises with more enthusiasm, as if sensing performance. Your little brother claps. The soup continues to be technically edible. You ladle portions into wooden bowls and hand them out like gifts with no receipts. Everyone eats quietly, like they're all trying to avoid insulting Gerald's memory. No one asks for seconds, but no one dies. And in this house, that counts as a win. You eat your portion last, scraping the sides of the pot with your spoon, hunting for extra flavor, or perhaps meaning. You find neither, but your stomach stops growling, so that's something. Afterwards, you rinse the bowls with leftover rainwater and dry them with a cloth that used to be a shirt that used to be your father's. The pot goes back on its hook. The ladle gets licked clean by the cat. You sit by the fire with your feet curled under you and stare into the steam rising from the last few drops of soup. You think about how many turnips you've eaten this week. You think about the word delicacy and how it has betrayed you. Outside, the rain starts again. You place the bucket back under the eave and whisper encouragement at the clouds. The wind picks up, carrying the smell of someone else's dinner. It smells like meat. You ignore it. You tell yourself your soup was fine. It had texture. It had Gerald. It had emotional layers. You sip the last bit of broth straight from the ladle and imagine it's a fine consommé served in a castle where people wear pants that fit. You fall asleep full enough. Not happy, not content, but not empty either. This is the delicate balance. You eat things that don't taste like food. You drink rainwater and call it broth. You survive on minimal ingredients and maximum narrative. You tell yourself the soup was good. You tell yourself tomorrow will be better. You survive anyway. You accept that everything is dirty. Not just muddy or smudged or covered in soot from the hearth, but dirt in its deepest, most treacherous form. The kind of dirt that crawls under fingernails and builds a small but thriving civilization. The kind that seeps into your pores while you sleep and wakes you up itchy and questioning your life choices. You've made peace with the grime, mostly. What you haven't made peace with is what it does when it gets inside you. You don't know the word bacteria, but you do know your cousin licked a dead frog last summer and hasn't made eye contact since. You know the man who sold onions at market was once robust and ruddy, and then he wasn't. You know that when the well water starts to smell like old eggs and sighs, you should boil it until it begs for mercy. You don't understand the science, but you understand patterns. You understand that people who wash their hands with hot water don't die as often. You understand that if something smells like a mistake, it probably island. So you boil things. You boil water before you drink it, and then again just to be safe. You boil your socks if they've touched anything that moved on its own. You boiled a spoon once, just because your brother sneezed in the same room. He said you were dramatic. He also hasn't had worms this month. You count that as a victory. You boil your clothes on Sundays, which is a process that takes 3 hours, a fire large enough to cook a witch, and the emotional fortitude of someone preparing for battle. The pot is wide and dented. You fill it with water that started as ice, drag it to the hearth like a defeated gladiator, and dump your tunics in one at a time. They hiss like they're offended. You stir the pile with a stick you call regret. The smell that rises is not evil exactly, but it's not friendly either. It smells like effort. It smells like you're trying. Soap is a myth, or at least the kind you hear about in songs. You make your own, which is to say you smash together lye and tallow and hope no one notices the difference. It doesn't smell like lavender. It smells like consequences. You use it anyway, because hygiene is less about scent and more about survival. You scrub until your knuckles feel polished. You ignore the parts that bleed. Everyone bleeds. Bleeding is fine. Infections are not. You boil your emotions less frequently, but with equal intensity. When your brother tells you your hair smells like goat, you pretend not to care. You throw your rage into the fire and watch it pop like wet pine. When the neighbor girl laughs at your patched trousers, you smile with all your teeth and then spend the evening muttering into your pillow. You boil it all down into something small, something quiet, something manageable. You are a pot that never whistles. Your grandmother says cleanliness is godliness, but she also eats cheese with mold on purpose. You've stopped taking advice from her since the foot rot incident. Instead, you develop your own routine. You rinse your feet with rainwater, scrape your nails with a sliver of bone, pick seeds out of your hair before they sprout. You line your boots with ash to keep the damp away. You smear vinegar on a cut once and saw heaven. You now do it weekly. Pain is a cleanser. Pain means it's working. Bathing is less frequent, mostly because it's awful. The water is cold, the soap is rude, and the privacy is non-existent. You wait until your skin feels like it's considering rebellion. You boil a bucket of water, mix it with snow to get the temperature from scalding to survivable, and pour it over yourself in the barn. The goats judge you. One of them bleats like a witness. You bathe fast, violently, like you're trying to erase a crime. You come out pink and steaming, part human, part boiled yam. You once knew a girl who bathed twice a week. She smelled like pine and comfort. She also had boils on her arms and a habit of touching everything. You learned that too much cleanliness, like too much hope, is suspicious. You aim for middle ground, clean enough to not die, dirty enough to be respected by the chickens. Your hands are never fully clean. They are marked with stains and scars and occasional mystery. You scrub them with sand when the soap runs out. You dip them in the fire's shadow and call it close enough. You know which spots to check for mold. You know which rashes are temporary and which mean you should sleep sitting up. You've learned that cleanliness is relative. If no one else notices, you've succeeded. There's a man in the next village who smells like lilacs. Everyone says he's cursed. You believe it. You saw a squirrel fall out of a tree when he walked past. No one should smell like lilacs here. Lilacs don't even grow here. His cleanliness is too smooth, too rehearsed. You trust people who smell like smoke and salt. You trust people who stink a little by noon. You trust people like yourself. Washed, but not overly so. Alive, but barely. Tonight, you boil the linen you sleep on. You find a tick and name it Gary before crushing it with a ladle. You scrub the boards with vinegar stolen from a pickling jar. You rinse your hair with mint water, which makes your scalp tingle and your eyes burn. You cut your nails by candlelight and drop the clippings into the fire like offerings. You lie down, skin clean, mind restless, wrapped in blankets that smell like damp wood and trying. You know that tomorrow the dirt will return. It always does. It waits under the floorboards, in the seams of your sleeves, behind your ears. It is patient. But for now, you are scrubbed, you are boiled, you are not dead. This is enough. You survive. Barely. You survive anyway. At first, it's just a joke. Sleeping next to the goat. Ha ha. Very rustic. Very charming. Someone makes the comment while you're all pretending not to freeze over dinner, and everyone laughs like they haven't secretly thought the same thing. But then the temperature drops, and the wind through the cracks in the walls develops opinions, and suddenly the idea of pressing your body against something warm and alive seems less funny and more like basic physics. The goat is named Hilda. She didn't ask to be, but it stuck. She is large, judgmental, and has a beard better groomed than yours. You eye her from across the barn like a suitor unsure if they're out of their league. She eyes you back like someone who's seen your worst moments and was not impressed. She chews hay in the kind of slow, deliberate way that lets you know she is not intimidated. You make your move anyway. The first night is awkward. You lay your bedding down in the hay with the kind of hopeful precision that says, this isn't desperation, it's strategy. You speak gently, offering your presence like an apology. Hilda does not respond. Hilda steps on your foot, lies down 6 inches from your head, and begins to chew in a way that makes you question every decision you've ever made. But the barn is warmer than the house. The goat is warm too, once she stops pretending she's not going to kick you in the ribs. You shift closer. She shifts away. You shift closer again. She sighs in a tone that carries generations of maternal disapproval. Eventually, you find a truce. Your arm draped over her middle, your cheek pressed against fur that smells like old apples and modest contempt. You fall asleep faster than you expect. The air near her is humid and slightly sour, but it doesn't cut like the wind outside. You stop shivering. Your spine uncurls. You start to dream, first about warmth, then about bread, then about warm bread, and then about bread that speaks to you and asks why you never come to visit anymore. You wake up confused, but rested. Hilda wakes up too. She sneezes directly into your face and walks off. This is the beginning of something. You try it again the next night. This time she doesn't step on your foot. Progress. She still waits until you're just drifting off before shifting all her weight into your hip, but at least she's choosing proximity. You take it as a win. You sleep deeply. You dream of stew. You wake up in a puddle that might be goat-related and decide not to ask questions. By the third night, you start bringing offerings. Bits of beet, carrot tops, a piece of cloth that smells like salt. She accepts them with a tilt of her head that might be gratitude or might be a warning. Either way, she lets you lean your back against her side. You wrap the shared blanket over the two of you like a peace treaty. She grunts once, then settles. Her body heat radiates like a small, irritated sundae. You consider yourself lucky. There is a moment, just before sleep, when you forget you are in a barn. The hay is soft, the sounds are familiar, and the scent of goat has become so constant it's almost pleasant. You forget about the cracked roof, and the hole in your boot, and the fact that you're one bad harvest away from disaster. You forget the cold. You dream of butter. You begin to trust her. You begin to know her moods. When she shifts her weight, you shift yours. When she twitches in her sleep, you murmur nonsense words until she settles. When she farts, you pretend not to notice. You tell yourself it's just another part of nature. You tell yourself it's bonding. You tell yourself it doesn't smell that bad. You are wrong. Your family makes comments. They say you're getting too close. They say it's unnatural. They say the goat has started following you in the yard like a jilted lover. You ignore them. You know what warmth feels like. You know that Hilda has never once criticized your lack of prospects or your uneven stitching. You know she's never told you to stand up straighter or eat less or work more. She just exists, warm and steady, and lets you exist beside her. Sometimes that's enough. One night it snows. Not just a dusting, but the kind of snow that silences everything. The kind that creeps under doors and freezes water in bowls and makes the walls creak like they're considering early retirement. You carry your bedding to the barn without a word. Hilda is already lying down. She doesn't move when you come in. You lie next to her. She shifts slightly to make space. You tuck yourself against her, and she rests her chin on your arm. You pretend not to notice. You dream of cake. In the morning, the world is white and cruel. Your breath fogs in front of your face like a warning. You sit up slowly. Hilda remains asleep, or pretending to be. You watch her for a moment, the slow rise and fall of her breath, the tiny twitch of her ear, the way one of her hooves ended up tangled in your blanket. You smile. You scratch behind her ear. She opens one eye and stares at you like you're ridiculous. She is correct. You drag yourself back to the house with a heat in your bones that isn't from fire or effort. Your siblings ask if you're finally moving out to live in the barn permanently. You don't answer. You heat water for tea, holding the cup like it might tell your fortune. It doesn't. You sip. It tastes like mint and goat hair. You don't mind. That night, you go back to the barn. You bring an extra blanket. Hilda meets you at the door. You pretend not to be pleased. She pretends not to be waiting. You lie down side by side like two creatures who understand the economy of warmth. You snore. She farts. A bond is formed. You dream of bread. You survive anyway. You strike the flint like it owes you rent. Not just rent, but back rent, interest, and the emotional damages of sleeping in a damp hut that smells like betrayal and mildew. Your hands are numb, which doesn't help. Your breath fogs in the air like an accusation. The kindling is stubborn. The twigs are skeptical. The fire does not want to be born today. You hunch over the cold ashes of yesterday's success, poking at them like they might apologize for dying. They don't. You scrape flint against steel, again and again, trying to coax something divine out of two rocks and a bad attitude. When the first spark lands, it dies instantly. You whisper encouragements, which become threats, which become prayers in a language only the desperate remember. You do not call it magic, not aloud, but everyone knows it. Island. There's a reason the old women whisper over hearths and spit before lighting torches. There's a reason you say thank you to the fire when it finally catches, even if no one's listening. You may not wear robes or have a wand, but you are still a practitioner of the ancient flame. You are the kindling whisperer, the dry moss interpreter, the god of smoky hope. Today's spell involves moss, birch bark, and twine stolen from a suspicious-looking basket. You arrange them in a small heap, the way you've seen your uncle do when he was sober enough to be competent. You strike flint again. A spark lands. You blow gently, like you're trying to convince a baby bird to wake up and build civilization. The spark flinches, then vanishes. You try again. And again. You think about naming the fire, giving it something to live for. You consider sacrificing a toe, just one, to appease the elemental gods. You mutter things. You stop being polite. The smoke curls once, then gives up. You sneeze violently, which somehow helps. A tiny flame flares up like it's offended. It wobbles, flickers, then holds. You stare at it, stunned. You try not to move, not to breathe, like it's a deer in a clearing or a relative in a good mood. You feed it slowly. Slivers of stick, dry grass, a prayer spoken into your sleeve. It takes them. It grows. It becomes a proper fire, small but proud, like a kitten that's just discovered it can hiss. You sit back and watch it crackle. There is warmth now, not enough to undress, but enough to remember your fingers. You hold them out like offerings, wiggling them like they just returned from exile. The fire dances in its own rhythm, smug and crackling. You feel like a god, a small, smoke-covered, soot-faced god. Then the wind shifts. The smoke hits your eyes like gossip. It burns with the intensity of truth. You cough. You curse. You wave your arms like a drowning bird. The fire doesn't care. The fire is cruel. The fire reminds you that all power comes with suffering. Your clothes absorb the scent immediately. Smoke and sweat and whatever you stepped in earlier combine into something uniquely medieval. You pretend it's cologne. You tell yourself, this is what survival smells like. You lie convincingly. Other people in the village light their fires differently. Some with slow rituals, some with stones you've never seen before. One man swears by sunlight through glass, but also once tried to marry a broom, so his credibility is thin. You prefer the reliable agony of flint. It hurts, it fails, but eventually it works. You trust it, the way you trust a mule that kicks only sometimes. Your neighbor Bertha claims she can light fires with her eyes. You saw her once, staring at a pile of sticks while muttering about betrayal and honey. The sticks burst into flames. You aren't sure if it was magic or if she poured something flammable on them first. You don't ask questions. You nod respectfully. You do not cross Bertha. You try her method once, just to see. You sit by your cold hearth, arms folded, scowling at the wood like it owes you rent and a personal apology. You whisper a curse you made up on the spot. Nothing happens. You try again, adding more scowling. Still nothing. You sneeze. Your nose is running. You go back to flint. The fire you build today lasts longer than most. You feed it carefully, pacing your sticks like bread in a famine. You don't dance around it, but you consider it. You don't thank it aloud, but you think it very hard. You burn your sleeves slightly, reaching too close, and tell yourself it's just part of the ritual. You are a vessel. You are a forge. You are a slightly charred miracle. Eventually, people gather around it. They pretend they came for the conversation, but you know the truth. They want the heat. They want the glow. They want to bask in the ancient magic you summoned out of twigs and spite. You let them. You don't say anything when someone asks if it was easy. You just smile like a wizard who doesn't share secrets. You sneeze again. Later, when the fire dies, you feel a strange emptiness, not sadness, exactly. Just the absence of something powerful, like forgetting a word you almost remembered. You stare at the ash, still warm, and feel both proud and slightly betrayed. You know it will be harder tomorrow. You know the fire owes you nothing. You know you'll beg it anyway. You brush soot from your cheeks and go inside. The warmth lingers in your bones. You smell like a forest on fire. You wrap yourself in a blanket that still smells faintly of goat and hope. You dream of dragons, of torches, of cities lit by a single match. You survive because you made fire. You survive anyway. You scratch without ceremony, one hand under your tunic, the other already resigned. The sensation is less itch and more declaration of war. Your skin has become a battleground. A tiny civil war conducted by fleas with ambition and no regard for borders. You scratch again. You win nothing. They retreat momentarily, then regroup. Somewhere near your collarbone, there is a general coordinating a counterattack. The fleas came in with the goat, or the pig, or Bertha's nephew who always smells like vinegar and secrets. They came, they saw, they colonized. Now they live in your clothes, your bedding, your hair. You are less a person and more a landscape. You tried bathing once, a full-body submersion in creek water so cold it erased your ability to pronounce consonants. You emerged shivering and flea-free, only to dry off with a towel that reinfested you immediately. The towel lives in the compost now. You mourn nothing. You turn to the wisdom of herbs. Bundles of lavender and pennyroyal hang from the rafters like botanical hostages. They smell like effort and vague promises. The mice love them. They chew through the stems and leave neat little piles of herb shrapnel near your bed. You wake up with mouse footprints on your face and the realization that you are not feared. You are not even respected. You are simply another piece of the architecture. You start naming them. The mouse that sits near the fire at night and grooms itself like a guest? That's Sir Basil. The one that lives under the cupboard and gnaws on your shoe like it owes him money? That's Gregor. You don't name the fleas. You refuse to dignify them. Sometimes you see a spider and whisper a thank you. You nod solemnly as it scurries past, a silent mercenary doing the work your traps have failed to accomplish. The spider catches flies. The flies breed in the thatch. The thatch rains debris into your soup. You do not think about it too much. You light a candle and speak softly to the rafters. Not prayers exactly, just verbal agreements. You promise not to scream if they keep their distance. You request fewer droppings near your sleeping area. You threaten eviction knowing full well you have no such power. The candle flickers. Something squeaks in response. You try traps. Carved wooden devices baited with stale crumbs and quiet desperation. They snap shut in the night with the kind of finality that makes you sit up straight. You shuffle over in the morning, dreading what you'll find. Sometimes you catch a mouse. Sometimes you catch a sock. Once you caught your own finger. You still flinch when you butter bread. You start wearing rosemary tucked into your belt. It makes you smell like a roast. But people nod approvingly. You don't know if it repels anything besides potential suitors, but it gives you purpose. You carry a bundle of sage like a sword, You sweep it across your bedding with all the solemnity of a priest cleansing a cursed altar. Nothing happens. You sneeze. A flea jumps triumphantly from your wrist to your knee. You consider crying. You share your home with things that consider you part of the decor. The mice rustle in the thatch above your head like disapproving relatives. The fleas dance behind your knees. Something skitters in the corner, then disappears when you look. You once made eye contact with a rat in the pantry. It did not blink. You left the pantry and considered moving. Bertha gives you advice. She says to rub garlic behind your ears and chant the names of your ancestors backward. You try it. You succeed only in smelling like a haunted stew. The fleas remain. The mice begin to bring friends. You start hearing unfamiliar chewing patterns in the night. You begin to adapt. You develop a scratch reflex that functions in your sleep. You keep your bread in a hanging basket, suspended from the ceiling by string and sheer optimism. You tap the walls before sitting down, just in case something already claimed the spot. You no longer flinch when you see movement. You only flinch when it stops. You once tried to cohabitate peacefully. You laid out crumbs deliberately, a peace offering to the mice. You drew a line on the floor with chalk. This side yours, that side theirs. They did not respect the boundary. They pooped on it instead. You think of castles and wonder if lords scratched like this. If kings had to shake out their bedding, frown at the lint, and discover it was moving. Probably not. Probably they just had people to do it for them. You imagine a servant whose sole purpose was to stand by the fire, ready to stomp on rats. You envy that. You find a dead flea on your blanket one morning. You hold it in the light, like a trophy. You are victorious, briefly. Then you scratch again. The war continues. Sometimes, when the house is still, you hear gnawing. Not loud, just steady, focused. You imagine tiny hands sharpening tiny teeth, preparing. You light another candle and whisper threats. You draw sigils with soot and mutter words you make up on the spot. You tell yourself this is protection. You tell yourself you are in control. You are not in control, but you survive. You are the pest control. You carry a stick, because not carrying one got someone killed. You don't remember who. The story changes each time it's told, depending on who's been drinking and how much. Sometimes it's your cousin. Sometimes it's a nameless traveler who thought he could outrun tusks. Always ends the same. A bad decision, a snort in the underbrush, a scream that sounds like someone learning regret too late. So now you carry the stick. You name it hope, not out of optimism but out of sarcasm. Hope is what you have when you don't have armor. Hope is longer than your arm and slightly crooked, which makes it dignified. You sanded it down with a rock until the splinters gave up. You carved a spiral into the handle to make it look purposeful. You sleep with it beside your bed. You've swatted more than a few things with it, including Bertha's goose, who still holds a grudge and hisses when you walk past. But the goose respects hope, as does the dog that once tried to eat your left calf, as does the boar. The first time you meet the boar, you don't see it. You feel it, like the world has inhaled and forgotten to exhale. The air stills. The birds stop gossiping. Your spine develops opinions. You turn, and it's there. A wall of fur, muscle, and deep disappointment. Its eyes are small and angry, like it was woken up too early and blames you personally. Its tusks are not ornamental. They are punctuation marks on the sentence that is your impending doom. You raise hope. You say, "Good piggy," in a voice that trembles slightly. The boar does not understand English, or kindness, or mercy. It charges. You sidestep like you've seen people do in stories, which mostly means you fall into a bush and scream. Hope connects with something. There's a sound, a grunt, a moment where physics negotiates with luck. The boar stumbles. You scramble. Hope swings again, less like a weapon and more like a desperate gesture. The boar decides you're not worth it. Maybe it remembers a previous engagement. Maybe it respects your style. It vanishes into the undergrowth like a rumor. You sit there, panting, heart attempting escape, and thank hope aloud. You mean it. You start talking to hope after that. You apologize when you drop it. You thank it when the path is quiet. It becomes less a tool and more a companion. You worry slightly about your mental state, then remember you're sleeping next to goats and whispering threats to mice. You let it go. The second time, you're smarter. You carry fermented apples in a satchel made from a ruined shirt and misplaced optimism. They smell like betrayal and cider. You've heard stories, half muttered and mostly ignored, that boars love them. You don't know if it's true. You don't know if the boars know, but you figure it's better than screaming. You walk loudly now. You used to think silence was safe. It's not. Silence gets mistaken for prey. Loud gets mistaken for confidence, so you crunch leaves on purpose. You clear your throat in dramatic fashion. You talk to hope like you're in a play no one asked to watch. You feel ridiculous. You also feel alive. The forest responds in kind. It rustles when it wants. It shifts shadows like cards in a gambler's hand. You don't trust it, but you respect it. That's enough. You learn the paths boars like. You avoid them unless you have to forage there, in which case you mutter apologies in advance. You leave apples. Sometimes they're gone when you return. Sometimes they're not. You take it as a sign of either peace or incompetence. You don't investigate too closely. You start recognizing signs. Dug up earth, trees rubbed raw, a certain tang in the air that suggests anger and bacon. When you sense it, you move. Not quickly, casually, like you have somewhere better to be but aren't in a rush. Panic smells like dinner to a predator. You walk with the confidence of someone who's been nearly murdered by a pig once and would rather not repeat the experience. People ask you why you keep going into the woods. You tell them you need mushrooms, or berries, or time alone. The truth is, you've learned more about yourself there than anywhere else. You've learned your knees can bend in ways you didn't know. You've learned hope can block teeth. You've learned that survival is mostly theater, and you are now a very convincing actor. The boars are still out there. One of them has a scar on its left flank, shaped like a question mark. You wonder if it remembers you. If it tells stories to its piglets about the screaming human with the furious stick and the apples that smelled like decisions. You wonder if it carries a bit of you in its memory the way you carry it in your dreams. You sharpen hope sometimes. Not the end, just the attitude. You oil it with tallow. You whisper to it before bed. A habit now. You hang it by the door, like a sentinel. People think you're odd. That's fine. Odd people live longer in the forest. You hear a grunt sometimes, distant but deliberate. You pause, hand on hope, heart practicing drum solos. It passes, or maybe it doesn't. Maybe it circles. Maybe it watches. You don't know. That's the thing about wildness. It owes you nothing, but you respect it. And in turn, it hasn't killed you. Yet, you trade a turnip for 3 bent nails. You trade the nails for half a spool of thread, and the thread for a scrap of cloth that smells like someone else's winter. You don't remember who started the exchange. You just remember raising your voice slightly, gesturing with your arms, and making eye contact like it was a threat. This is bartering. It is not polite. It is not elegant. It is screaming until something changes hands. The market is not a market. It's a rectangle of packed dirt, surrounded by people who don't believe in lines and consider elbows a negotiation tool. Goods sit in baskets, on blankets, in laps. No signs, no prices, only stares. If you have questions, you don't ask them. You hover, you grunt, you point. Sometimes you nod at something until someone nods back. Then you give them a root vegetable and hope it was enough. Coins exist. You've seen one once. It was shiny, round, and utterly useless. The blacksmith keeps it nailed to the wall as a joke. He says it's worth a cart of dreams and half a goat. No one knows what that means. No one asks. Currency is theoretical. Chickens are real. You've learned to carry your trade goods in a woven sack you made from dried reeds and blind optimism. Inside, a small wheel of cheese, 3 eggs, hopefully not hollow, a ball of wax, and 2 buttons with only minor rust. You approach transactions with the air of someone about to challenge a bear to chess. You have nothing to lose except dignity, and that left 3 markets ago. Your most consistent barter partner is Elric, who smells like he lost a bet with a swamp and always wears the same wool hat no matter the weather. He trades in things you didn't know could be traded. One week, he offered a fish wrapped in poetry. Another, he tried to exchange half a candle and a story about his uncle's ghost. You gave him a turnip and your silence. He seemed satisfied. Sometimes you trade for things you don't need, just to keep the wheel spinning. You once bartered a spoon for a prayer. You don't know if the prayer worked. You don't even remember what it was for. Possibly bread. Possibly a less haunted sleep. Either way, you still have the spoon. You learn to keep a ledger in your head. Not numbers, names, debts. The memory of a raised eyebrow that meant next time, and the weight of a nod that meant you're square. No one writes it down. Writing is for monks and liars. You just remember. And if you forget, someone will remind you. Loudly. In public. Favors are the most dangerous currency. You once helped Gilda carry firewood, and she paid you with a promise. That was 3 months ago. Now she appears at your door with a pig that needs calming, and a bucket of leeches that needs sorting. You don't ask why, you just do it. Because one day, you'll need Gilda's help, and she'll say yes without blinking. Or she won't, and then you'll owe her again. That's how it works. Guilt is part of the trade. You trade food for help, and help for time, and time for something that sounds like kindness, but feels like obligation. You bake an extra loaf and give it to Bertha, because she once stopped your roof from collapsing with a stick and a very aggressive chant. She didn't ask for bread. You didn't offer it, but it passed between you anyway. You watch the truly skilled barterers with awe and a mild sense of terror. They operate like dancers or wolves. They don't speak so much as circle each other with narrowed eyes and calculated shrugs. They touch objects like surgeons. They feint, they retreat, they strike. Then a cabbage disappears, and someone walks away with a pair of gloves that used to belong to a different family. No one sees the exchange. It simply occurs. You practice in the mirror sometimes. Your stern face, your skeptical eyebrow, your disappointed grunt. You try them all, hoping one of them sticks. You still overpay sometimes. Once, you gave up half a chicken for a jar of pickled hope. The hope turned out to be onions. You ate them anyway. Some days, you trade without speaking at all. Just a nod, a gesture, a heavy breath. You place a bundle on the ground. They place a different bundle beside it. You both walk away. You don't check until you're home. If you hate what you got, you live with it. If you love it, you pretend you don't. Joy is not something you broadcast. It invites renegotiation. You've learned who to avoid. The old man with the eye patch and the basket full of knives made from suspicious bones. The woman who only trades in dreams and stares at your forehead when she speaks. The child who once convinced you to give up your last candle for a riddle with teeth. You didn't sleep that night. Bartering is not about fairness. It's about survival. You give what you can, get what you must, and try not to look too satisfied. You whisper deals in corners and shout refusals in the street. You act like it's all beneath you, even as you clutch a fresh pair of socks with a reverence normally reserved for relics. Sometimes you walk away empty-handed, but heavier with stories. You trade them later, around the fire, for laughter, for attention, for the quiet feeling of being useful. One time, you told the tale of the goat and the bar of soap, and accidentally earned a whole basket of plums. You're not sure how. You learn the art of pretending you meant it. You learn the weight of a glance, the shape of a smirk, the power of a sigh. You learn that screaming is not always yelling. Sometimes it's the tilt of your chin when someone offers you something absurd. Sometimes it's a silence that lasts just long enough to mean everything. You trade until your hands are empty and your pockets full of someone else's problems. You survive because you know the value of nothing and the cost of everything. And when someone offers you 3 acorns and a blessing in exchange for your last onion, you don't even blink. You just nod and scream quietly where it counts. You don't remember what dry feels like. Your feet are wrapped in strips of wool that used to be part of something else. Maybe a cloak, maybe a sheep, maybe a mistake. They smell like regret and damp promises. They itch in ways that feel personal. You call them socks because calling them mildewed regrets makes people nervous. They do not keep out water. Nothing keeps out water. Water finds you. Water waits. This morning, it rains in a way that suggests the sky is angry and petty. The kind of rain that seeps under your hood, your collar, your soul. You avoid puddles for approximately 4 seconds before stepping into one that goes deeper than your expectations for adulthood. You look down. There is no escape. The water laughs. Your toes curl like they're trying to file a complaint. You carry on, pretending nothing happened, but everything happened. Your sock, if it ever deserved the name, now weighs as much as a small loaf of bread and squelches with every step, like it's trying to get attention. You have seen what happens to people who ignore wet feet. You've seen the toes of old men, twisted like forgotten roots. You've seen Bertha's left foot, permanently pruned, a living raisin. She tells the story with a warning tone and eyes that have seen too much. Foot rot, she says, and everyone nods like it's a ghost you might summon by walking too far from the fire. You start muttering the words yourself, like a prayer or a threat. At home, you peel off the sock slowly, like it might scream. Your foot looks pale, slightly blue, offended. You wiggle your toes. They respond like they're considering rebellion. You sit by the fire and hold your foot out like an offering to the gods of warmth. The heat bites before it soothes. Your skin tingles. You wince. You whisper apologies. You consider walking barefoot forever. At least then, when your foot is wet, it makes sense. At least then, you aren't lying to yourself with false wool and damp delusions. But then you remember thorns and goat droppings, and that time you stepped on a beetle the size of a spoon. You keep the socks. You just hate them more honestly now. You try drying them by the fire, but you've learned from past mistakes. One time, you left a sock too close to the flame. It hissed, then smoked, then curled in on itself like a dying spider. You cried. Bertha clapped. She said it was a cleansing. You said it was your last good foot wrap. She handed you moss. You said nothing. You now hang them carefully on a stick you call the rack of mild redemption. The socks dangle like damp spirits. You poke them occasionally to check their mood. When they no longer drip, you declare victory, even though they're still damp enough to ruin your morning. You convince yourself it's fine. You have developed a tolerance for mild suffering. It's your most medieval skill. There was once a rumor that someone in the next village had leather shoes. Real ones, not stitched bark or repurposed pig bladders. Actual leather. You considered theft. You considered marriage. You considered if your soul was worth dry toes. You still don't have an answer. The truth is, socks are not a luxury. They are armor. They are the last fragile defense between you and a fungus-based lifestyle. Every time you walk through a meadow, you think of the dew. Every time you step near a stream, you hear the squish of memory. You've developed the gait of someone always bracing for disappointment, because you are. You once tried stuffing your foot wraps with straw. It worked for 20 minutes. Then the straw shifted and created a bramble puzzle that stabbed you with every step. You cursed. You limped. You declared yourself a pioneer. No one was impressed. The goat followed you for half an hour, chewing the trail you left behind. You know the signs now. The heavy drag of fabric, the sharp intake of breath when you put weight on the wrong toe. The smell. Oh, the smell. A wet sock left in a corner becomes a creature. It grows. It evolves. You named one Harold. You burned it ceremonially after 3 days and buried the ashes far from your hut. You've tried preventative methods. You waxed your feet once, after hearing a rumor from a traveling tanner that wax repels water. All it did was make your toes slippery and terrifying. You fell twice. You slipped while standing still. You ended the day face down in mud, whispering to your ancestors for advice they did not give. Now, you accept it. You live in a world where your feet will be wet, where socks are lies you tell your heels, where dry is a dream you visit only in sleep. But you still try. You still drape them over the fire. You still hold them up to the sun like a hopeful child showing a drawing to a disinterested parent. You still pray. The prayer isn't fancy. It's not even structured. It's just a whisper to the wind, a plea to the stars, a grunt toward the heavens. Something like, "Please let me not get trench foot before breakfast." You say it every morning. Some days, it works. Your feet steam by the hearth. You curl your toes like you're testing them for life. They respond, slowly, resentfully. You thank them anyway. You'll walk again tomorrow, through puddles, through fog, through the betrayal of your own footwear. You'll do it with socks that used to be dry and a heart that used to believe. Because survival isn't about winning. It's about not giving up, even when your feet are soup. You smear goose fat on your face like it's war paint, and the enemy is weather. The first time you did it, you gagged. The second time, you just winced. By the third, you'd accepted your fate as a sentient roast. The smell no longer bothers you. What bothers you is how well it works. You are warm, slick, but warm. You do not know how you got here. Standing in the corner of your hut with a pot of slightly congealed fat and a bone spoon. The pot sits on a wobbly stool like an honored guest. The fat gleams. You stir it absent-mindedly, then dab some on your nose. Your reflection in the water barrel confirms it. You shine like a glazed ham. You nod in satisfaction. No one taught you this. You learned it the way you learn everything else out here. Through desperation and Bertha, she told you once, while chewing something that might have been bread or might have been bark, that the only thing standing between your skin and winter's wrath is a good smear of something dead. She demonstrated by slathering duck fat across her forehead and declaring herself invincible. That was last winter. She got frostbite on one toe, but only one. She says that proves her point. You keep your goose fat in a jar previously used for pickled eggs. It still smells like pickled eggs, which adds an unexpected tang to your skincare regimen. Sometimes, when you pass people on the road, they sniff and look confused. You look them dead in the eye and dare them to ask. They never do. Your hands are also coated, though less by intention and more by contact. You wipe them on your tunic, but your tunic has also been involved. There is no part of your body that has not, at some point, been introduced to animal fat. It's on your collar. It's in your hair. Once, you found a streak behind your knee. You do not ask how. You simply accept. Goose fat is the preferred choice. Pigs are too useful. Cows too valuable. Ducks are slippery and unpredictable. But geese give you grease and a reason to live. You hate them. They honk like they know things. They bite like they mean it. But when they die, you thank them with reverence and possibly a song. You render the fat yourself. This involves a pot, a fire, and the willingness to smell like breakfast for 3 days. The first time you did it, you attracted a fox. It stared at you for 2 hours, then left a gift near your doorstep. You think it was respect. You think it might have been a threat. The fat starts off thick and wobbly, like something that shouldn't exist. You heat it gently, stirring with something that used to be a spoon, but is now mostly stick. It melts into golden oil, bubbling slightly, smelling like survival. You skim off the bits that look too honest, then pour the rest into jars, crocks, hollowed-out turnips, whatever's clean and vaguely leak-proof. You tuck them away in cool places. You guard them like treasure. They are treasure. You've considered selling some, trading a bit of warmth for firewood or extra wool. But the thought of parting with your skincare hoard fills you with primal fear. You might need it. You always need it. Winter lasts longer when you don't count days, just layers. You apply it every morning after the ritual of pretending to stretch and deciding against it. A little on the cheeks, the chin, the nose, the lips get special attention. You've seen what happens when someone skips. Their mouth splits open like bad fruit. You avoid eye contact and offer them soup. The wind respects goose fat. You walk outside, face gleaming, and the wind hisses past like it knows it can't win today. Your neighbors look dull and dry. You look like you're auditioning for a medieval fashion scroll called Glossy and Alive. You smile at them. They don't smile back. They're cold. You've tried other fats. Once, in a moment of misguided curiosity, you used bear grease. It worked, but you smelled like a myth. Children followed you. Birds circled overhead. You washed it off with snow and regret. Another time, you tried badger tallow. It made your skin soft, but also possibly cursed. You heard whispers for a week. You went back to goose. The fat has side effects. You can no longer touch paper without leaving prints. Your pillow is permanently stained. You have become a hazard near open flames. Once, your sleeve smoked. You beat it out with a bucket. The goat was unimpressed. But these are the costs of beauty. You pay them gladly. Sometimes, when the fire is low and the cold creeps in through cracks you cannot find, you sit with your fat jar and whisper your plans. Not big ones, just tomorrow's survival. You talk to it like a friend, a confidant, a strangely translucent therapist. It listens. It gleams. You catch your reflection again and tilt your head. Your cheekbones look defined. Your forehead could fry an egg. You look radiant. In a way, only someone who lives in constant threat of frostbite can look radiant. You are not beautiful. You are preserved. You hear someone approach and tuck the jar away. They ask if you have extra grease. You lie. You say you're out. You say it with the straight face of someone who knows the true currency of warmth. You are not a monster. You just value your glow. Tonight, you'll apply a thicker coat. The wind is picking up, and the sky has that heavy silence that means snow is coming. You'll rub it on your elbows, your knees, your neck. You'll smell like Tuesday. You'll sleep warm. Oil is survival. Oil is your armor. Oil, island. Everywhere. You step into the woods knowing full well you could get lost again. You've gotten lost enough to reconsider your understanding of home, but still you go. The forest breathes around you, ancient, indifferent, and oddly opinionated. You mark trees as you pass. A notch here, a rock piled there, a twig stuck in a knot that looks like a question mark. You pretend these are signs, faint pulses of communication, though you suspect the forest thinks you're a nuisance. Your gut, the unreliable narrator of your body, often leads you astray. It once insisted you turn left, which you did, and promptly discovered a goat encampment, 3 pigs sharing a trough, and a path that led nowhere but back to your own stink. Your gut is dramatic, prone to hyperbole, and horrendously directionally challenged. Still, you consult it. You walk until your gut flutters. Then you do the opposite of what it wants, which has worked exactly twice. You also depend on rumor. Folks say there's a bent tree shaped like a question mark just past the creek, and if you follow it, it points you home, or to a man who sells sour milk and stories. You followed that bent tree more often than you care to admit. It never lies. It might just lead to the milk cellar, but that's often good enough. Today, you pick up a shape from the clouds, a donkey maybe, or a wisp of driftwood, or half a heart. You interpret that as a sign. You walk south, then northeast, then southwest, based on angles you sort of believe in. The clouds shift. They look like an owl now. You hesitate. You sigh. This entire navigation scheme feels like you're negotiating with invisible cartographers. But it works. Sometimes. You travel without purpose, which feels odd to articulate. People travel with purpose. You emerge from the woods with mushrooms you didn't intend to find, and crumbs of moss that decided to hitch a ride. Occasionally, you return to the village with neither but with stories. I almost met a fox, or the path smelled like thunder, or I danced with a willow. The villagers nod and pass you a crumb of bread, which is reward enough. You've made mistakes. You followed a squirrel deeper than comfort dictates and ended up in a thicket that scratched your face so hard you still bear the memory. One time you thought you knew the way back, but realized halfway across a meadow that you had forgotten what houses looked like. You stood under a sky that didn't recognize you until a crow overhead cawed, and suddenly you remembered your name. You laugh now, but you didn't then. Each return is quiet triumph. Your boots are caked with unfamiliar earth. Your hair is wild with wisdom and twigs. You lean into the memory of direction. West felt honest here. North felt ironic there. You trace the route later with your finger on a table scarred like a map. You mumble out the path as though it's a lullaby. It island. You carry stones in your pockets. Small, smooth, chosen because one felt like regret, one like excitement, one like a question. When you're unsure, you drop one on the ground to mark the way. When you return, you pick it up. Each stone holds the echo of where you've been, your own breadcrumb trail. You study the bird's flight, the rustle of ferns, the way moss clings to the north side of trunks. You learn to follow shadows like they know something you don't. You learn wind patterns, how they bump you gently when steering you away from cliffs or into clearings with good lighting for dinner making. You survive not because you always know where you're going, but because you never assume you do. Loss becomes your compass. If something feels too familiar, you retrace your steps. If something looks like home when it's not, you walk farther. You cultivate uncertainty. You build resilience. When you finally stumble into the village, it's twilight. Lantern light fractures against rooftops that look like they've grown in place your whole life. You look like an abandoned souvenir, tired, scratched, luminous with stories. Someone passes you a bowl of soup without asking where you've been. You drink it, mind half in memory, half in gratitude. Later, in bed, you trace a finger over the map you've sketched on soft earth, zigzag lines you can't read. You lie awake, thinking of tomorrow. The forest might invite you back. The bent tree might wait. The clouds may again suggest a direction you can't trust. You close your eyes, hold onto your stones, and let the dark guide you home without instruction. You survive because you never go anywhere on purpose. And somehow, that's enough. You gather 4 sticks, all slightly bent, quarrelsome, and collectively resembling a family with poor posture. You've dragged them from the forest edge, each one named in your head, though you'll never tell. They rest against one another in a half-hearted tripod, like they mean business but have mornings yet to fully commit to. You tie reeds around their tops. The reeds stick to your fingers. You accidentally inhale one. which makes you sneeze and briefly wonder if this is how all great shelters begin. With a sneeze and a bad idea. You weave smaller branches into gaps, pressing moss where something looks especially drafty. Each placement is a negotiation. You ask the moss politely to block wind. It trembles. You whisper apologies when it falters. You are sorry, you say softly, and the moss stays, for now. The roof leaks almost immediately. Not drips, because that implies intention. Drip drops, erratic, mocking, like the sky is rehearsing its own tiny percussion performance. You adjust a branch. You replace a reed. The leak mocks you again. You stand inside your creation, listening to the rain's tiny laughter. You do not care. It stands. You stand. That is enough. The floor sinks in spots. You don't notice until your foot disappears into a hollow you unknowingly stepped over twice. You brace yourself like a gambler losing a roll. You poke at the ground with your stick, whose name remains hope even though you're sick of it, and dump in more moss. You pat it flat with your hand, which now smells like damp forest floor and compromise. The floor sogs a little less. You call it a victory. You sit inside and breathe. You are finally slightly drier than outside. The world feels kind of blurry, like a wet canvas that might salvage itself. You think about grand shelters, stone cottages with chimneys and promises. Yours is a single room made of sticks, reeds, and regret. But walls exist. A roof is overhead. You can sit inside it without entirely focusing on the rain's taunts. That is a shelter. It's not pretty. It's crooked. The branches cross at odd angles. The reeds stick out like hair today. You step on a twig, and it snaps in a way that sounds accusatory. You apologize to it. You're sorry. Will you still keep it? It cracks again. You collect the pieces later to rattle when someone yells, just to startle them. You dig a shallow trench around the entrance, hoping it'll divert water. It fills immediately. You curse the rain. You curse the trench. You curse all this ingenuity. You then step into it and splash your boot. You curse yourself. But you don't abandon the idea. You widen the trench slightly and tell it newly strong. Better now, maybe. You build a simple frame for a door. 2 sticks, leaned apart, with moss thrown on top. It looks like a frown. You stand back and observe. Welcome, you say. It echoes. You like it. Inside, you hang an old cloth from a branch, half to shield from moisture and half to test if drapes make a place you'd call home. The cloth sags with resignation. You pat it and whisper, "Thank you," because it softened your heart. You crawl in with everything you need. The rag you call a blanket, a piece of stale bread, your pocket stones. The air inside is humid and weirdly peaceful. You don't care about perfection. Dry enough is a victory. Mostly dry is a diplomacy. You close your eyes against the damp breeze slipping through a gap. Rain hums above you. It's a lullaby, refusing to apologize. You press your hands against the damp reed wall, feeling its texture, its life, its failure. You think about comfort. You think about tomorrow. You think about needing shelter again. Faster next time. You fall asleep to the rhythm of dripping. It becomes a heartbeat if you squint. When you wake, you're still dry enough. The damp is there, yes. In corners, in memories, in your boots. But you are alive. You are sheltered. You are present. In that crooked, leaky, moss-laced box of sticks, you find a measure of warmth. It shields you not just from the rain, but from the idea that you can't build. It stands, and so do you. That is everything. You chew with the deliberation of someone who understands that dental care is a myth and molars are a loan from fate. Once, long ago, you had a 4th tooth. It fled during a particularly aggressive encounter with a walnut. You held a small funeral involving a thistle and a bad poem. Now, you guard the remaining 3 like they're family heirlooms. They are not strong, but they are loyal. You name them. Not out loud, of course. That would be strange. But in your mind, they have identities. One is brave, one is cautious, and one is mostly decorative. The bread is not bread. It is a geological artifact with a crust like shame. You tap it against a stone. The stone yields. You frown. You soak the bread in yesterday's broth, which was already made from soaking last week's crust, which was made from the memory of barley. This is called economy, or recycling, or survival. You swirl it with a stick until the water thickens and the bread softens just enough to resemble something chewable. You lift it to your mouth like it's sacred, it kind of island. You chew slowly. One molar tackles the job, the others supervise. There's no room for recklessness. Your jaw is your last remaining tool that doesn't smell like firewood or regret. You gnaw sideways, like a rodent on trial. The goal is not satisfaction. The goal is ingestion. You chew because you must, not because it's enjoyable. Joy left town with your 4th tooth. Sometimes you avoid food entirely if it looks aggressive. Hard cheese, for example, is out. You once cracked a tooth on it and blamed a cousin, even though he wasn't there. Dried meat is a negotiation, every bite a gamble. You slice it thin, place it between your cheek and gum like a squirrel hoarding for winter, and hope it becomes edible before you become skeletal. You envy children with baby teeth. Disposable, temporary, replaceable. You think about building dentures from bark. You attempt this one evening with glue made of despair and pine sap. It does not go well. You laugh about it later, which hurts. Because laughter is a jaw exercise and you're out of shape. You start speaking with a closed mouth. Your words turn soft, mumbly, poetic. You develop a new dialect, one that doesn't require full dental expression. You feel like a bard, with secrets. People nod. They assume you're wise. You do not correct them. They think your silence is mystery, but it's mostly fear of losing. Tooth number 2, cooking becomes strategic. You boil everything, including things you shouldn't. You once boiled a turnip so long it dissolved into philosophy. You sipped it and felt deeply emotional. The fire judges you, crackling in a way that sounds like laughter. You respond with salt and a threat. You begin using spoons more. You used to think spoons were weak. Now you see them as allies. A spoon never asks too much of you. It cradles. It cooperates. It understands your limitations. You sleep with one under your head now, just in case. You dream of softness, a pillow made of mashed peas, bread that yields at the first hint of moisture, a roast so tender it sobs. You remember your grandmother used to gum carrots until they wept. She had no teeth. She said that made her stronger. You believe her now. Your relationship with food changes. It's no longer about flavor. It's about strategy. You break meals into stages. You soak. You sniff. You test. You tap things against your remaining teeth like a carpenter testing wood. If it passes, it enters. If not, it joins the compost, which is mostly bones and betrayal. You become inventive. You stew mushrooms into mush. You crush berries into puddles. You slice vegetables so thin they're practically rumors. You survive on porridge, because porridge has no agenda. Porridge doesn't judge. Porridge waits for you. Your jaw begins to click. You ignore it. Clicking is the language of resilience. Your cousins laugh, but you know they're envious. They still try to chew roots raw. You watch them weep behind the barn. You offer soup. You feel magnanimous. One day, you bite into something new. It's tender, soft. It yields instantly. You almost cry. It's a roasted apple, buried in coals until it forgot it was once crisp. You chew it with all 3 teeth. Gently, reverently. It tastes like warmth and mercy. You remember feasts. Sort of. They're distant, exaggerated memories, banquets of softness, rivers of gravy, bread that didn't threaten lawsuits. You no longer chase those memories. You make your own. With 3 teeth and a wooden spoon, you build new joy. You don't eat to indulge. You eat to endure. Each bite is an affirmation. Each chew is a promise. You may only have 3 teeth, but you use them like an artist uses their last brush. Carefully, lovingly, and always, without regret. The berry is red. So was your cousin after he ate one. But this one looks slightly different. Less aggressive in its hue, more bashful. You pluck it and examine it with the solemnity of a priest holding a curse. You sniff it. It smells like forest gossip. You roll it between your fingers. It squishes like overconfidence. You eat it anyway. Regret, as it turns out, is tart. Your lips tingle. You wait. You've learned not to panic immediately. Some things just want to be noticed. You sit on a stump that used to be a tree and watch the world to see if it tilts. It does not. You survive. Barely. You mark the berry with a stick and call it maybe. You've developed a system for identifying edible things. It's not foolproof, but it is enthusiastic. You nibble, you wait. You prod things with the goat's nose. You watch birds. If birds eat it and don't explode, it goes in the maybe pile. If the goat eats it and begins to hum, it goes in the absolutely not pile. The goat has no standards. You remember your uncle tried a mushroom once. He danced for 3 hours, then tried to marry a rock. No one told him the rock was already engaged. He lived, technically. He never looked at soup the same way again. You think of him every time you see mushrooms with little hats. You do not trust hats. Your meals become ceremonies. You gather bark and boil it until the water looks thoughtful. Bark tea is not delicious, but it is honest. It tastes exactly like you expect. Woody, bitter, slightly resentful. You sip it and pretend it's a choice. You call it medicinal because calling it survival juice makes people nervous. You experiment, cautiously. You try chewing a pine needle. It stabs you back. You apologize. You move on. You discover nettles can be food if you scald the arrogance out of them. You do so, whispering threats over the pot. The nettles wilt, ashamed of themselves. You eat them and pretend to enjoy it. Everything in the forest is edible once. This is both promise and warning. You approach plants like old lovers, curious, cautious, braced for betrayal. Some greet you kindly, others want to see you weep. You learn which leaves cradle bugs and which cradle poison. You learn by watching, by sniffing, by listening to the trees. Some trees hum when you walk by. Others remain silent, the kind of silence that follows bad news. You avoid those. You invent names for the things you can eat. Scratchy leaf, belly's gamble, the bitter truth. You do not bother with Latin. Latin is for monks and gravestones. You name things with respect and a little fear. You whisper your gratitude before you chew. The forest does not offer seconds. You roast roots. You crush seeds. You pound acorns into meal and pretend it's bread. You once tried to grind stone moss into paste. You cried for an hour and blamed the wind. But later, you tried again, softer, slower, with more hope than sense. It was slightly less terrible. You learned to test with your skin before your tongue. A rash is better than a funeral. You rub leaves on your elbow like a strange new religion. If your elbow burns, you name the plant. Nope. If your elbow sings, you proceed. If your elbow does nothing, you assume indifference and chew with one eye closed. You remember when food came from someone else's hands. Warm bread, dripping stew, the smell of comfort. Now it comes from soil and risk. Each bite is a dare. Each meal is a question you answer with your stomach. You have become a scholar of hunger. You once found a bulb in the ground, shaped like a secret. You boiled it, peeled it, tasted it. It tasted like apology. You ate the whole thing and cried from joy or memory, you're not sure which. You tried to find another. You never did. It haunts you still. Your fingers are stained with trial and error. Your mouth is wiser now, skeptical, guarded. You've learned the difference between bitter and lethal. You've learned that sweetness is rare and usually means someone else already marked the tree. You teach the younger ones what to eat and what to fear. You do not always remember correctly. Sometimes you tell a story to make up for it. If it curls, don't chew. If it shines, don't touch. If it whispers, walk away. They laugh. Then they listen. Then they forget. You watch them with affection and dread. You dream of honey. You once had it, a finger dipped in gold stolen from a beehive at dusk. The bee stung your cousin. He said it was worth it. You agreed. That was 5 winters ago. The memory still tastes like sunlight. Now, your treats are rare. An overripe berry, a mushroom that didn't lie, the rare moment when bark tea surprises you by being less awful than usual. These are the moments you cling to. These are the moments you collect, tuck away, and chew slowly. You do not eat recklessly. You eat deliberately. You eat because you want to see another morning where the fog lifts and the trees do not whisper your name in past tense. You eat and you remember. You hear the howl before you see the eyes. It floats across the valley like a rumor, long and lean and too confident for comfort. You drop your bundle of twigs because twigs are not worth dying over, even if you spent half the morning arguing with a hedgehog for them. You freeze like soup left out overnight. You become an exhibit titled, Person Considering Every Life Choice All at Once. The trees are suddenly too open, the shadows too opinionated. You slowly kneel behind a stump that has already betrayed 3 squirrels today. You whisper a threat to it. The stump does not care. The eyes arrive. Yellow, curious, a little judgy. You do not blink. Blinking is weakness. You remember this from the village's one surviving hunter who retired after accidentally trapping himself in his own net. He said wolves know fear, debt, and the scent of pork. You are all 3. You try not to sweat pork. You have learned how to vanish, not completely, but enough. You know where the brush grows thickest and where the ground betrays you with loud twigs. You know that movement is a gamble and stillness is an art. You have practiced holding your breath so well that you once forgot to start again. You were revived by Bertha and her terrifying slap, which may have also cured your hiccups forever. The wolf steps closer. You consider offering it a favor. You once traded 3 eggs and a comb for a promise of silence from a bard who definitely did not remain silent. You wonder what a wolf values. You have no meat. You have no gold. You have a small bone in your pocket that you talk to sometimes. You decide not to mention it. You remember the trick. Become uninteresting. Wolves do not eat statues, rocks, or terrible ideas. You are all 3 right now. The wolf sniffs the air. You mentally list all the things you haven't washed in 3 weeks. You are the opposite of appetizing. You are a pile of regrets in a tunic. The wolf moves on. You exhale in lowercase. You learn the same trick with debt collectors. They don't howl, but they do linger, sniffing around after rumors of wheat or unclaimed pottery. You owe 2 nails, a jar of turnip paste, and something called emotional restitution to a man named Gregor who once lent you a wheel that immediately rolled into a stream. You sent it a farewell poem. Gregor was not moved. When collectors come, you do the same thing you do with wolves. You vanish, not with magic, but with practiced misdirection. You walk backwards into a crowd. You duck into barrels. You invent errands. You once hid under a goat and pretended to be its shadow. The goat was confused but accepting. You consider that day one of your greatest performances. You know that survival is equal parts skill, silence, and spectacle. You keep a cloak just for disappearing. It smells like mildew and legend. You throw it on when things get loud. You become part of the landscape. You are moss. You are rock. You are slightly damp disappointment, and that is your power. At night, you train. Not with swords or bows. Those are for people who expect confrontation. You train in sneaking, dodging, folding yourself into a haystack, and making your footsteps sound like regrets instead of declarations. You once startled a chicken so badly it laid an egg in defense. You apologized. Then you took the egg. You build escape plans into your routines. When gathering herbs, you note which bushes itch and which ones hide you best. When collecting water, you learn to tread softly near loud frogs. They tell everything. You memorize every tree knot and rabbit hole between you and the nearest door you can close in a hurry. Sometimes, you get bold. You make eye contact. Not with wolves, but with the other kind of predator. The kind that smells desperation and barters for it. You smile with the corner of your mouth that still believes in dignity. You say you're between fortunes. They laugh. You laugh. No one believes either of you. The trick is never to run, unless you're sure you'll be remembered fondly. Running leaves footprints, debts, and questions. You prefer to fade. Fading is elegant. Fading doesn't involve sprained ankles or thrown turnips. You once tried hiding in plain sight, joining a group of pilgrims passing through. You wore a borrowed hood and spoke only in shrugs. They thought you were mute or deeply holy. You ate like royalty for 2 days before someone noticed your shoes didn't match your story. You slipped out during evening prayer and haven't stopped walking since. Every sound is a warning. Every shadow is a decision. You've learned to trust the shift of wind and the silence of birds. If the forest goes quiet, so do you. You duck, you wait, you breathe in the soil. You become the thing nothing notices until it moves. You've survived like this for seasons, hiding when necessary, appearing when helpful, always knowing the weight of your own footsteps. Wolves still howl, and collectors still knock, but you have mastered the ancient ways. Vanish with flair, exit with dignity, and always, always blame the wind. Today, you almost got caught. The wolf sniffed your path twice. Gregor passed by your hut and lingered, but they left. You remain, not triumphant, but untouched. You eat your dinner in silence, chewing slowly so the night doesn't hear you. You watch the fire flicker and think about all the places you've hidden, under carts, inside chimneys, beneath layers of excuses. You pat your cloak and whisper your thanks. You are here. You are invisible enough. You hear the crack of a twig behind you and immediately flatten yourself against the wall of your own spine. It's either a wolf or Bertha's third cousin looking to collect on that suspiciously flexible loan you took in exchange for 1 bucket of eels and a vague promise of future fortune. You don't remember the exact terms. You just remember you were cold, desperate, and the moon looked like it was judging you that night. You stand still, completely still. Not the kind of still that says, "I'm not moving," but the kind that says, "I may no longer be alive." You slow your breathing until even the moss growing out of your sleeve looks more animated. You become an abstract concept, the art of survival through deliberate irrelevance. Wolves don't eat rocks. Collectors don't bother ghosts. The footsteps pass, soft and uncertain, like someone trying to decide whether you're prey or just part of the scenery. You risk nothing, not a twitch, not a breathy sigh. You have entered full medieval stealth mode, which mostly consists of panic in layers. You are a professional at this. You didn't used to be. You once tried to run from a goat. It chased you for 3 fields and a moral lesson. Now you don't run. You vanish. There's a difference. Wolves come and go. They're honest about their intentions, which you respect. Debt collectors are worse. They smile. They wear shoes. You know they're dangerous because they smell clean and use words like obligation and due. They carry satchels filled with threats disguised as parchment, and sometimes they carry lists. You've been on 3 of them, sometimes under aliases you didn't even know you had. One of them called you Gregory, which felt offensive. You once hid in a cabbage cart for 6 hours while a collector asked villagers if they'd seen anyone answering to, slightly damp, smells like boiled root, always fidgeting. The cabbage vendor looked straight at your hiding spot and said no. You never forgot her. You also never paid her back. Your hiding places are many, and none of them comfortable. You've curled into wood piles, slumped beneath overturned barrels, and once stood motionless in a pond for 45 minutes pretending to be a log. It worked. Mostly. You got leeches. That was a lesson. But you didn't get caught, and that's what matters. You know the forest paths better than your own fingernails. You know which brambles snag and which ones support. You know how to walk through reeds without parting them, and how to talk to birds without making sound. You've developed a talent for blending in with sheep, though they're starting to recognize you now, and one of them seems to have a grudge. You've named him Philip. You avoid Philip. You learned from watching foxes. Not the obvious stuff, like how they move. No, it's how they wait. Foxes don't chase, they anticipate. They pick their moment. You've done the same. You've waited for the perfect moment to slip behind a wagon, to duck into a stranger's root cellar, to pretend you're related to a passing pilgrim group by adopting a limp and a profound silence. You survived 3 days with them before someone asked too many questions about scripture and you had to fake a divine vision. It got weird, but they fed you. Your life is a slow dance with potential disaster, but you've made it elegant. You carry breadcrumbs in one pocket, lies in the other. You leave no footprints, only rumors. People whisper about you. The one who trades silence for soup. The shadow with boots. Possibly Gregory. You prefer it that way. You don't want to be remembered. You want to be misremembered. The details should always be just wrong enough to buy you time. When things get too close, you throw a rock. Not at anything specific, just in a direction. Then you duck and become part of the wind. Let them chase the echo. You've survived entire days by redirecting suspicion into bushes. You once tricked a pack of angry dogs by rolling in goose droppings and pretending to be their cousin. That story isn't worth repeating, but it worked. Sometimes you wish you could rest. Actually rest. But resting invites visibility, and visibility invites questions. And questions. Well, you've survived by not answering any for at least 2 winters. You've trained your face to respond only in shrugs and squints. It's harder to interrogate someone who appears to be mildly possessed. Your diet helps too. No one suspects a person who's gnawing on a turnip like it owes them money. You always look busy. Busy people aren't worth chasing. They're already punished. You've watched others try different methods. Confrontation, negotiation, emotional appeals. They usually end up working for the local baron or married to someone with aggressive opinions on porridge. Not you. You keep your freedom in the folds of your sleeves and the curve of your back pressed to a wall. You think about the wolf again. You remember how its eyes gleamed, but not with malice. Just hunger. It's the same gleam you've seen in your own reflection, when you catch a glimpse of still water and mistake yourself for a warning. You understand the wolf. You understand the collector. You even understand Philip the sheep, though you're still not over what he did to your boot. Night falls. You gather your things, 2 rocks, a crust, a half-broken spoon, and move on. You sleep under stars when you can, under wagons when you can't. You dream of places where people don't remember debts or notice footprints. You dream of a day where you don't have to hide, but not too hard. Dreaming too much makes you slow, and slow is visible. You gather by the fire because it's there, and because everyone else is already there, pretending it doesn't matter that their socks are wet and their souls are leaking. You settle into the patch of ground someone politely refers to as dry-ish, which is a generous lie. It's mud with ambition. Still, you sit, because this is what you do when everything hurts and you need to remember you exist. You're surrounded by people who also smell like damp regret and smoked cabbage. Nobody says anything about it. That would be impolite. The air is thick with smoke, boiled turnip, and the kind of silence that comes from mutual understanding. If we don't laugh, we cry, and no one brought tissues or emotional bandwidth. Someone pokes the fire. It doesn't need poking, but poking the fire is less confrontational than poking the truth. You stare into the flames and pretend they're warm. They are, if you sit close enough to lose your eyebrows. You've done it before. You still mourn those eyebrows. Bertha starts a story. She always does. It's about the time she outran a storm, a bear, and her second husband, all in one day. Everyone listens, not because they believe her, but because it's better than thinking about what's in tonight's soup. It sloshes in the pot like it knows shame. You're going to eat it anyway. You already licked the ladle when no one was looking. You might be the reason it tastes faintly of desperation. Gregor laughs too loud. He always does. It's his contribution to morale, that and his increasingly creative ways of explaining why he still hasn't fixed the hole in the roof. Ventilation, he says. Sky access. An invitation to the stars. You slept under that hole last week and woke up with a frog on your forehead. You haven't been the same since. The kids pass around something that might be bread or might be compressed root. You take a piece. It crunches like regret and tastes like it used to be alive. You smile anyway. You say, "It's not bad," which means it didn't kill me instantly. That's the standard now. You share what you have. A story about a chicken who tried to outsmart you and nearly succeeded. A piece of cloth that might have once been a shirt but now functions solely as a complex emotional support item. You offer it to the group like it's sacred. No one takes it. That's respect. In return, you receive a half-burnt carrot and a nod. It's the best trade you've made all week. No one says it out loud, but this is the only reason you're still sane. Not the fire, not the food, not even the brief illusion of safety. It's the others, their stories, their laughter that sounds like coughing but carries weight, their way of sitting close without demanding anything, their ability to pretend that what you're doing is normal, that surviving like this isn't held together by string, spite, and communal delusion. You look around and realize nobody here is doing well. Everyone's got something missing. Teeth, hope, a clean pair of anything. But together, you are more than what's missing. You are noise, warmth, shared silence. Rollo starts singing. It's off-key and possibly in the wrong language, but everyone joins in. You hum even though you don't know the words. Nobody does. That's not the point. The point is the joining, the noise that pushes back the dark, the defiance in harmony. You think about how this is the closest thing you've had to joy in months. Not a feast, not a victory. Just sitting beside people who understand the weight you carry because they're carrying it too, and they're doing it while offering you part of their turnip and pretending it's hospitality instead of survival. You realize no one here would let you starve. Not completely. Not unless they were starving too, and even then, they'd apologize. Maybe leave you the nicer bone. The soup is ready. It smells better than usual, which means someone sacrificed a valuable herb or made a deal with the culinary spirits. You eat it slowly, pretending it's thicker than an island. It tastes like ash and kindness. You say, "This is good," and everyone nods, relieved that someone broke the silence first. Bertha finishes her story. It doesn't end well. Most of them don't. But she adds something absurd at the end. Something about a goat, a barrel, an accidental sainthood. Everyone laughs. Not because it's true, but because it could be, and because laughter makes the cold back off for a while. You stay by the fire long after the pot is empty. and the wood begins to whisper that it's done giving. The stars blink awake overhead. Someone snores, someone hums, someone farts and pretends it was the wind. No one moves. You should sleep, but you don't want to leave. Not yet. This moment, this warm, ragged gathering of survivors, is better than a blanket, better than dry socks. It is proof that you are not entirely alone in your ridiculous, stubborn existence. Tomorrow, you'll fight the cold again. You'll eat questionable berries and hope the latrine doesn't freeze. You'll barter for more sadness wrapped in leaves. But tonight, you are here, surrounded by people who also haven't given up. You lean back. The log beneath you creaks like it's trying to sigh. You let it. You let yourself breathe. You leave the fire eventually, not full of food, but full of something heavier and more useful. Something like hope, but seasoned with realism. You walk to your shelter, your hands still warm from borrowed heat. You sleep. And for once, you don't dream of running. You dance on feet that forgot what warmth feels like, sometime around the third frost. You stomp the ground not out of rhythm, but revenge. Your toes have gone on strike. The music is someone hitting a pot with a stick, someone else whistling with too much commitment, and Bertha clapping off beat like she's got a personal vendetta against tempo. Still, this is a celebration. Technically, no one remembers what you're celebrating. A good harvest? A wedding? The snow didn't kill everyone? Maybe the goat finally stopped screaming? It doesn't matter. The point is to make noise, to shout into the darkness, to pretend, for a few hours, that you are not always waiting to die quietly of exposure or stew fatigue. The drink is passed around in a cup that used to hold nails, or possibly tears. You take a swig. It tastes like desperation and old potatoes, but it burns in a way that counts as warmth. Someone insists it's cider. They are a liar. You drink more. Someone throws a bundle of something flammable on the fire, and it crackles like a warning. Sparks dance. People cheer like it's entertainment, and not a reminder that you're one mistake away from setting your only pair of pants on fire. Again, you edge away from the flames with the grace of someone who has already lost body hair to optimism. There is food, technically. A flat cake made of grain and denial. A soup so thin it qualifies as a rumor. A mystery meat that smells faintly of vengeance. You chew carefully. No one asks questions. The only rule is that you must look like you're enjoying it. This is the tradition. You eat like the world is full of abundance, and you smile with your 3 remaining teeth. Someone offers you something that might be pickled. You accept, because you are brave, and because refusing food is a crime worse than theft. It's admitting the hunger, so you feast, theatrically. You say, like a bard trying to seduce a goose. You compliment the texture, even though there is none. You pretend this is a banquet, not an act of collective performance art, designed to trick your stomach into behaving, and then you dance again. Not because you want to, because movement keeps you warm, and stillness makes you think. And thinking, tonight, is not the goal. The goal is to forget how thin your tunic island, how loud your ribs feel, how cold the wind is when it sneaks through the gaps in your shelter and whispers that survival is a maybe, not a promise. Someone sings. The lyrics are made up halfway through. They always are. The song becomes a chant, then a howl, then laughter. Laughter that shakes bodies bent from work and worry. Laughter that defies logic. It's not funny, but it's necessary. You dance harder. You pretend the ground is warm, that the stars are watching because they care, that tomorrow will bring something new, not just more of the same with fewer potatoes. You close your eyes and let the noise fill the space where fear usually lives. Gregor jumps over the fire. His sleeve catches a spark, and everyone cheers like this is part of the show. He pats it out with the confidence of a man who has nothing left to lose and no sleeves worth saving. He bows. You clap. This is culture now. Someone hands you a ribbon. It's stained, frayed, probably stolen from a funeral. You tie it around your wrist. This is called festivity. This is called color. This is called pretending you don't feel like a shadow wrapped in skin. The drink keeps going. The cup never empties, only transforms. Each round is a different flavor of mistake. You feel your cheeks go warm. You decide you're invincible. You dance with someone who might be Bertha's niece, or might be a hallucination. It doesn't matter. She laughs. You laugh. You forget your knees hurt. This is how you win. You don't beat the cold or the hunger or the endless sameness of barely getting by. You outlast it with noise and rhythm and lies you tell yourself under the guise of celebration. You pretend this is joy. And somehow, in pretending, it becomes real enough to hold. Later, the fire dies down. People collapse where they stand or shuffle off to their corners of the world. You wrap yourself in whatever is closest. Blanket, goat, philosophical despair, and settle near the coals. Your stomach grumbles, but quieter now, like it's been soothed by song and soup-shaped illusions. The stars are still there, unbothered, indifferent. You stare back like you've got secrets too. You fall asleep with ash on your hands and music in your bones. You dream of full tables, of laughter that doesn't ache, of fire that only warms and never threatens. You dream of a celebration where you know what you're celebrating. But even if you never find out, you'll still show up. You'll still dance. Because pretending life isn't horrible isn't weakness. It's survival. You burn the stew. Not slightly, not poetically, not with a golden brown crispness that could be rebranded as rustic. No, you burn it like betrayal. Like fire held a grudge, and the pot was just collateral damage. Smoke rises. The goat flees. You look into the charred mass at the bottom of your kettle and wonder if this is what shame tastes like. You do not cry, but your eyes water anyway. From the smoke, you say it's from the smoke. You try to fix it. You add water. The stew looks back at you with the dullness of defeat. You try to stir it. The ladle sticks. You scrape and mix and hope that movement will undo what heat hath ruined. Then, in a moment of culinary panic, you reach for the nearest thing that resembles salt. It is not salt. It is, upon closer inspection, dirt. Forest dirt. Earthy, honest, packed with character, and also probably ants. But you are committed now. You swirl it in. You convince yourself that dirt is just nature's seasoning, that ancient people did this all the time, that this is authentic, that grit is texture. You lie to yourself with the confidence of someone who has run out of options and good sense. The stew is thicker now, somehow both soggy and dry. The color is indescribable, not brown, not gray, something worse, a hue that suggests moral failure. You poke it with a stick. The stick stays. Still, you eat it. You eat it because wasting food is a sin punishable by ghosts and bad luck. You eat it because it's yours, because you made it, because survival has no palate. You eat it because even mistakes are fuel, and your body doesn't get to be picky when your bones are trying to eat themselves from the inside out. The first bite crunches. You tell yourself it's a root. You tell yourself, that's a good sign. Roots are healthy. Roots mean plants. Plants mean vitamins. You do not think about the time a beetle fell into your tea and you drank it anyway because protein is protein. This is different. You made this, which makes it worse. You drink broth, not sip. Drink, like it's a potion, and you're trying to reverse the curse you cooked into your own dinner. It sloshes down your throat with the enthusiasm of lukewarm ditch water. You tell yourself it's hearty. You tell yourself it has notes, earthy notes, forest bouquet, a finish like bark and memories. Your stomach growls in confusion. You pause, consider, then eat more. Chew slowly. Convince your tongue that taste is subjective and survival is not. You reach for stale bread to mop it up. The bread breaks your resolve, but holds the stew. It softens just enough to remind you It once dreamed of being food. You pretend it's fine. You look up and see Bertha watching you from across the fire. Her face says, "Bless your heart," in the way that implies no actual blessing is involved. She has a bowl. Her stew smells like hope and seasoning. She offers you some. You decline. You have something to prove. You will not be defeated by your own dinner. You chew your grit stew with the jaw of a warrior and the dead eyes of someone who just realized they confused time with dried weeds. Possibly from the latrine path. The thought passes. You do not let it stay. You eat another spoonful. You think about your ancestors, how they endured, how they survived, how they probably made better stew. Or maybe not. Maybe this is tradition. Maybe mistakes are part of the recipe. You eat more. You feel stronger. You lie. Not outwardly, just inside. In the quiet place where you store denial and pretend. You tell yourself the minerals in the dirt are good for you, that the burnt bits are rich in something, that you are acquiring a taste for disaster, that you will live to tell this story, and no one will ever know how bad it was unless you tell them. And you won't, because dignity is dead, but pride lives on. The bowl empties. You scrape the sides, chasing the last remnants of failure. You chew the silence between bites. Your teeth find a pebble. You wince. You swallow. You tell yourself that counts as grit. Emotional and literal. The fire crackles. The air smells like singed effort and misplaced trust in your own ability. Bertha's goat farts somewhere in the dark. You feel full. Not satisfied, but full. Full of something. Regret, probably. And minerals. Possibly ants. You sit back and exhale. You made food. You made a thing and ate it. It did not kill you. It made you slightly worse, maybe, but not dead. Which means you win. A very specific, very low bar kind of win. The kind that only makes sense when you live in a world where hunger walks closer than hope and your spice rack is a patch of weeds and delusion. You lick the spoon. You let the taste linger. You memorize it. Because next time, you'll do better. Or you won't. Either way, you'll survive. And that's seasoning enough. You bury your neighbor with the solemnity of someone who knows the work isn't finished just because the person stopped breathing. Death here isn't grand or poetic. It's dirt under your nails, sweat on your back, and the stubborn refusal of the ground to cooperate with your grief. The soil clings to your spade, like it resents being disturbed. You dig anyway, because leaving a body above the earth is an invitation, and not the kind anyone wants to accept. The body doesn't look like him anymore. It looks like work, like a heavy obligation wrapped in faded wool. You try not to think about the way he once laughed, or the way he used to hum badly while sharpening knives, or how he lent you a spoon that you still haven't returned. Instead, you think about rocks. Which ones are loose? Which ones you'll carry to weigh him down? Which ones you'll eventually reclaim because life doesn't stop demanding things just because someone's gone? You say words, because that's what people do when they stand over a hole in the ground. They don't have to mean anything. They don't have to be true. You mumble thanks you didn't feel yesterday, and forgiveness you hadn't thought of until now. The words rise like smoke, empty, but necessary. No one corrects you. The silence is kind enough not to argue. The smell lingers. It isn't cruel, just insistent. A reminder that life fades but presence clings. It threads into your clothes, curls in your hair, drapes itself over your shoulders like a damp cloak. You wrinkle your nose, but you don't complain. Complaints don't make the smell go away. Dirt does. Rocks do. Shovels do. So you keep working. Survival is cruel this way. You don't get the luxury of mourning properly. You don't sit in silence with grief until it feels manageable. You finish the job. You pat the earth down until it's level, until no one trips over it, until the wolves think twice. You mark the spot with a cross you don't believe in or a pile of stones you do. Then you walk away. You don't look back, because looking back invites softness, and softness is hunger with better manners. But you do return, not with flowers or prayers, with need. Rocks don't grow themselves, and the ones you hauled to cover his body are smooth and heavy and useful. You wait until the earth has settled, until no one's watching. Then you take a few. You whisper an apology you don't entirely feel. You tell yourself he'd understand. You tell yourself you'll replace them later, though you won't. The grave doesn't care. The grave doesn't notice. You feel guilty, but not enough to stop. Guilt doesn't feed you. It doesn't patch a roof or keep a fire lit. It just sits in your chest like a stone you can't use. So you ignore it. You press on. You use the rocks to build, to defend, to trade. Survival eats the dead too, just in ways that aren't always obvious. You remember him sometimes, though not for the reasons you should. You remember the way he scolded you for stepping on his cabbages. The way he once traded you a jug of questionable beer for a bag of equally questionable flour. The way he told stories that went on too long and never ended properly. You don't remember his kindness, if there was any. Kindness doesn't linger. Practicalities do. His spoons, his rocks, the smell. You learn quickly that mourning is a luxury you can't afford. You let go of people like you let go of seasons, reluctantly, but with acceptance. The world doesn't ask if you're ready. It just moves. You move with it or you stay behind and rot. You've seen too many stay behind. You keep walking. Some nights, though, the smell returns in your dreams. Not sharp, not unbearable, just present. You wake with it clinging to your nose, convinced the body is still there beside you, that you never buried it at all. You roll over, press your face into your blanket, and breathe through the wool until the memory fades. By morning, it's gone, replaced by the smell of smoke and goat. You're grateful. You move on. You don't talk about him. Not really. Sometimes his name comes up when people trade stories, usually about his debts or his bad jokes. No one mentions the way he died, or how you buried him, or how the fire in his hut still smells faintly of him when the wind shifts. Silence is its own respect, or maybe it's avoidance. Either way, it's survival. You pass his grave now and then. You don't stop. You don't linger. You glance at the stones, notice how the pile has shrunk since you took from it, and keep walking. The ground is level. The weeds are creeping back. The world is doing what it always does, forgetting. You envy it. And yet sometimes, when the night is too quiet and the fire burns low, you find yourself fingering the handle of that spoon he lent you, the one you never gave back. It's bent and tarnished, worn smooth by your hand. It stirs your soup, scrapes your bowl, tastes of every failure and victory since. You think of him then. Not kindly, not cruelly, just honestly. He was there, now he isn't. But the spoon remains. You eat, you live, you bury, you steal, you move on, because survival means letting go. Even when the smell doesn't, you stretch into the dawn like a poorly assembled scarecrow, joints cracking, breath fogging, eyes refusing to open all the way. The air smells like smoke that went out too early, and dirt that will never leave your clothes. You scratch at your sleeve, which scratches back. Your tunic has developed a personality overnight. Gritty, judgmental, damp. It doesn't matter. You wear it anyway. It's what you have. Your toes are cold, numb little stones inside boots that have forgotten they were once leather. They squelch faintly when you walk, even though you're not walking yet. Just the idea of movement is enough to make them complain. You curl them, as if curling will summon warmth, as if curling will remind them they belong to a body still alive. They don't listen. Toes are mutinous. Still you sit up. The blanket slides off, carrying with it the night's thin warmth, and you shiver so hard your teeth knock like gossiping neighbors. You rub your arms, rub your face, rub the idea of heat into your bones. It almost works. Almost. But almost is enough. almost always island. You look around. The fire pit is cold, a ring of ash and accusation. You'll coax it back later, beg embers into flame, pretend you meant to let it die. For now, there's only gray light spilling across the hut's crooked walls, only the faint sound of wind threading itself through the cracks you still haven't patched. You promise yourself you'll fix them today. You probably won't. Survival is mostly a series of promises you make to tomorrow. You survived yesterday. That feels important. You say it again in your head. You survived. You list what didn't kill you. The stew, the cold, the wolves. Gregor's endless story about how he once outwitted a crow. You endured all of it. You went to sleep with your chest rising and falling, and you woke with the same rhythm. That's what counts. Not the comfort, not the quality, not the joy, just the rising, just the falling. You stand, legs creaking like bad furniture. You sway for a moment, unsure if your body is willing to cooperate. It island. Barely. You shuffle outside, into the raw morning where the world feels half-born. The grass is stiff with frost, the air sharp enough to carve your lungs. You breathe it anyway. You breathe because that's the only rule that matters. In, out, again. The sun peers over the horizon like it's reluctant too. You understand. You're reluctant most days. But here you are, and there it is, and together you acknowledge each other's persistence. Light brushes your face, thin and weak but steady. You close your eyes and let it wash over you. You whisper something that might be gratitude, though it sounds more like a cough. You think of all the ways you could have disappeared by now. The frozen nights, the hungry days, the mistakes that nearly became endings. Yet here you are, stubbornly intact, wrapped in your own breath and the faint taste of hope. You laugh, short and bitter, but it's still laughter. It echoes in the quiet, small but defiant. You reach for your water jar, sip the cold liquid that tastes faintly of roof drips and clay. It's not good, it's not clean, but it's enough. You wipe your mouth with the back of your hand and stare at the sky. You don't ask for blessings, you don't ask for mercy. You just ask, silently, for one more day. And you know you'll take it however it comes. With hunger, with ache, with the endless itch of wool that scratches your skin raw, with smoke in your eyes and dirt under your nails, with fear that lingers and joy that flickers and the heavy knowledge that tomorrow might not be promised. You'll take it anyway. Because this is the whole technique. Not magic, not wisdom, not ancient secrets whispered by stone and fire. Just this. You keep going. You stretch in the dawn, you shiver, you ache, you breathe, and you decide to try again. That's all. The world doesn't clap. The forest doesn't bow. The sky doesn't open with applause. But you are still here. And somehow, that is enough.